The fountain, decorated with roses, creates a romantic atmosphere, perfect for the confession that the blonde man seemed about to make to his lady, but if you overhear their conversation. "I'm tired of you always following me around," the man said angrily, pulling his hands away. The girl was so shocked that she couldn't even put together a sentence in her defense. But the blonde doesn't stop and begins to threaten that he will tell about all her machinations and achieve the breakup of the engagement. The girl doesn't want to cling to him, but for some reason she doesn't say it out loud. But he just looks down sadly. This way she won't see eyes full of contempt. On such a sad note, the couple, or maybe not anymore, separated. "At last this episode is over," the lady whispered as she approached her carriage. "And then she will sit in that carriage, and the day will repeat itself." A lot of time has passed since the girl got into an affair. And once she was an ordinary worker, like thousands of others. Although, if you remember how it all ended, her life can hardly be called ordinary. The day that changed the heroine's fate was the anniversary of her relationship with the guy she fell in love with back in school and tried to get his attention for 10 years. Having finally become an adult, she was able to reach out to his feelings, so the girl hurries to the meeting. However, the guy, greeting her with a shining and treacherous smile, said that he was going to get married next month and they needed to break up. The heroine's face reflected genuine incomprehension and horror. She began to ask him warily if he had met anyone else. "You're so annoying, you're so intrusive." The cruel words hung in the air. As it turned out, his plan was to date for a while, and when the girl calmed down, he would leave her, because he never loved her. Finally, by saying that he has children and a family, he finally finished off the heroine. All the warm memories in that world cracked and shattered like glass, leaving behind only tears. Returning home, the girl reproached herself for her stupidity and naivety. While crossing the road, she was suddenly blinded by the headlights. But the heroine did not move from her place. There was no fear in her eyes. Grief seemed to have taken possession of her body. When she opened her eyes, the girl found herself alive. Moreover, she found herself in a luxurious room. Approaching the mirror, she was met by a lady of extraordinary beauty. In her, the heroine recognized Layla Bartwhistle, the same minor villain who dies at the beginning of the plot. She makes fun of the main character, Alicia, at any opportunity. Bad character, self-centered, always creating problems for others. She is in love with her fiancé, the son of a marquis named Julian, who does not even look in her direction. She can only humiliatedly watch as he flirts with other ladies. However, she dies in a carriage accident, and that is how she ends. And for some reason, the heroine found herself inside this story. She tried in every way to resist the plot, ran away, hid, to avoid the fatal carriage. But no matter how hard she tried, every time it all ended with the girl sitting in it and being reborn again at the beginning of the day. Why did I reincarnate as Layla? I kept asking myself, because she knew better than anyone that the more you chase, the further he goes. The ball came to an end, and the lady headed to the carriage, where after a while she would die, and the day would repeat its cycle again. "Mrs. Layla," a familiar voice called from behind. "It was Ian Ainsworth, the Duke's son. He is kind to everyone and has a strong sense of justice." One of the heroes of the novel who is in love with Alicia. Ian stopped Layla and demanded that she stop bullying the main character. The girl had already experienced this moment and knew that this meeting was not pleasant, so she humbly gave in, saying that the scene was over, and headed to the carriage. The Duke's son called out to the girl, but she did not respond, as she was in a hurry to die again. Then he intercepted her hand. The moment he turned Layla towards him, both of them caught their breath. But for the heroine, this happened because she realized that there was no such scene in the original. The man was confused by the girl's words, and began to ask what she meant when she spoke about the scene, to which she did not answer. As she was about to leave, she said at the end that they were useless extras, and the Duke, of course, didn't understand this either. To sort things out, he asked her to stay and explain. The heroine was confused, because before everyone followed their roles, despite all her efforts. But for the first time, her improvisation changed the course of history. Ian volunteered to escort the lady himself. The carriage had not even traveled 5 meters when another one crashed into it. Breathing a sigh of relief, Layla still couldn't believe that she had managed to escape death, dying over and over again, trying to attract the attention of a man who doesn't care about her, and then dying, feeling absolutely helpless. This life died in that carriage because now the heroine is free. Then the heroes got into the Duke's carriage, but the girl didn't even think to ask where they were going. All her thoughts were occupied with Ian, namely his unwavering kindness, because despite the fact that she was always mocking his beloved, he allowed her to sit in his carriage and even offered to take her. The man's question brought the girl out of her thoughts. He again asked the heroine to explain why she thought they were extras. Layla didn't know what to answer. It was hard to believe that this whole world was the story of some novel, but she decided to try, because it could change the despicable attitude towards her. "The world is described in some novel," the Duke said in shock, and it was impossible to tell from his face whether he believed her words. The lady, sensing defeat, began to justify herself by saying that this was complete nonsense. A pain appeared deep in her soul. She told him everything, both about the affair itself and about how she died again and again. The man turned to her again, feeling that these words would be decisive. The heart sank, preparing for any outcome. But it was a bummer. The Duke worriedly asked if she had hit her head and even suggested calling a doctor. The girl decided that this reaction was quite logical, but then she came up with a way to prove she was right. The lady offered to tell what would happen next in the plot, since it is impossible for an ordinary person to predict this. When the carriage arrives at the square, Alicia will be there with an armful of flowers. The man was overcome with doubts, but he decided to take part in this quarrel. Meanwhile, the carriage arrived at the place of the dispute. The square seemed empty, everyone could be noticed. But among all of them, a green dress stood out, seeming to enliven the gray streets. The Duke was confused when he recognized Alicia. Leaning towards the bird, she accidentally collided with someone. This man also stood out from all the others. He had white-gray hair and red eyes that would definitely be imprinted in anyone's memory. He asked if the main character was okay, holding her gently. Ian, watching this from the carriage window, at first felt jealousy towards the girl. And then, the realization of what was happening overwhelmed him with shock. To this, the lady merely said that she knew how this story would end, and added with regret that his love was doomed to failure. The man called the heroine his progenitor, and although not without doubts, believed in the girl's powers. But despite fate, he does not want to give up his feelings for Alicia. Layla was amazed, genuinely amazed, by his persistence. Ian continued to reason that if everything the girl said was true, then she should have died, but she was alive and well, which meant that the plot of the book could be changed. The heroine was confused, but insisted on not completely changing history, and perhaps fate would come for her again, waiting for the right moment. But the Duke was positive, because the possibility of changing history still exists, so he does not want to give up just because it is supposedly predetermined. My breath caught again. Layla was inspired by his speeches. Thanks to him, she is once again ready to fight injustice and defend her choice. Ian is truly a genuine person, and it's now clear why readers were so kind to him. If he hadn't called out to her then, she would never have moved from that dead point. So Layla decided to ask such a person to enter into an alliance that would be beneficial to both of them. The Duke was confused and did not know what to answer. Meanwhile, Julian arrived home, again outraged by the thought that he would again have to, on his father's orders, babysit what, in his not fully informed opinion, was a scoundrel. He was met by the family butler, who informed him that Mrs. Layla was currently absent. The Marquis's son did not immediately understand what he heard again, because he was sure that Layla should have returned by this time. Therefore, no matter how much he did not want to, he had to go and get her personally. Driving past that very square, his gaze was caught by a red carriage opposite the window. A man whom he recognized as Ian and his companion emerged from it. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw who the Duke was helping down. It turned out to be his Layla. Many questions arose in his head, the main ones being why and how they ended up together. Let's return to Layla, who is now trying to persuade Ian to make a deal, following which she must tell everything that will happen further in the plot, and in return, he will help her fall in love. The interlocutor was embarrassed by the fact that she already had a fiancé, Julian. According to the plot, yes, the one sitting in front of him doesn't love him at all, Layla justified herself. Helping the lady down, the Duke admitted that he was still confused and could not even find the words. So he asked to postpone the discussion of the alliance. The girl understood the gravity of the decision, and without thinking twice, she agreed with it. He could have simply nodded, but apparently Ian really is a very serious person. The next morning, he was ready to continue the conversation. The girl, sensing that the Duke had taken the bait, agreed and invited him to discuss it on the veranda over a cup of tea. First, she asked what exactly the Duke would like to know. He wanted to sincerely believe her, so he couldn't help but ask the question that interested him most. He is haunted by the fact that Layla bullied Alicia in the past and would like to understand why she felt such strong hostility towards her. To this, the heroine calmly replied that it was not she who was mocking her, not the Layla who was sitting in front of him. The Duke's face expressed incomprehension, and the girl continued. She lived the same day over and over again, yesterday by the way, and at the end of each such day she died. Layla, who had been bullying Alicia until yesterday, was a minor character in the novel, and the heroine had only entered her body yesterday, so she had never touched Alicia before. In the original plot, Layla was in love with Julian, and since he was paying attention to the main character, she took out all her anger on her out of jealousy. That was her role. It's not because she hated her, it's just that according to the script she was supposed to prevent Julian and Alicia from being together. The Duke was still overcome with doubts, and the girl said that one day he would see for himself. Now, all she wants is to break up with Julian and find the man she truly loves. In the meantime, the heroine can call the blonde guy as many names as she wants to replenish the nerves she spent on him. The embarrassed face of the Duke from such an unflattering stream of words amused the heroine, and for the first time since arriving in this world, she laughed heartily. Not believing himself, Ion decided to trust Layla no matter how crazy her words were. The cherished saving hand appeared before her. The alliance was concluded. She admitted that she herself does not know her future because she was supposed to die in that accident. Now perhaps she will again be required to play the role of Layla. The heroine will try to resist this, but it may happen that one day she will again become the one who bullied Alicia. Just as Ion wanted to say something, a male voice was heard from behind, calling Layla. It was Julian. The lady began to noticeably worry he couldn't find out about the affair. She had to find a way out, somehow. The Marquis looked at the Duke with a heavy gaze, not understanding his presence with her. But he decided to deal with Layla first, asking her to step aside for a talk. Having received a refusal, he began to interrogate her about what she had done yesterday, slightly humiliating her with it. We need to come up with something urgently. Are you really interested in me? I'm flattered, the heroine said, smiling stupidly. Julian was speechless for a moment. Who would even want someone like you if you don't want the engagement to be broken off? Stop acting weird. As soon as his voice returned, he immediately went on the attack. Having said one last thing not to disgrace the family name and leaving behind an uncomfortable atmosphere, he left. Even if the heroine escaped death, the role of Julian's bride still remained hers, and she only thought that she was finally free. Ian was concerned about the girl's condition, but she just waved it off, saying that everything was fine. The heroine came to her senses and realized that she had not yet completely gotten rid of the prescribed role of Layla. The Duke saw the lady's confusion, but decided it would be best to remain silent, when suddenly the girl continued. I will cope no matter what it costs me, and I will create my own history, Layla said with unshakable confidence and finished. But for this I need to find someone special at the spring ball. Alicia, born into a noble family, suffered oppression and humiliation all her life, not only from Layla. Until one day Prince Gilbert noticed her, and love blossomed between them. The novel is divided into 4 parts, each named after a season. The first chapter is the spring ball, and begins with Gilbert asking Alicia to dance, and the couple who danced at the spring ball find a special connection. But while these events have not yet happened, let's return to our heroine. She invited Ian to the meeting, already anticipating a good day. The Duke did not know what to expect, but he arrived at the appointed time anyway. As it turned out, the reason was simply ridiculous. The lady simply wanted to choose a dress for an upcoming event, and she needed a man's opinion. The spring ball is held in honor of the founding of the state in the run-up to the holiday. Even aristocrats lose their heads with excitement. Ian was very surprised to learn that the girl had not yet chosen an outfit because the ball was already next week. The heroine admitted that she already had the dress. Moreover, it was incredibly elegant and expensive, but too lush and not at all to her taste. Remembering him, she grimaced comically. So today, Layla wanted to go shopping and completely change her look. After listening to the girl, the man smiled and concluded that in front of him was indeed not the same Layla he knew. Even after realizing that the heroine was using him, he agreed to play along with her. Here, having relaxed her vigilance, the girl let it slip that there was another reason. But quickly putting an end to the conversation, she dragged Ian straight to the shops. First, they decided to choose a dress that would highlight all the advantages of the lady. And then they started choosing jewelry to make the look even more chic. To take a break from the constant fittings, they went into a cafe. Layla thanked the Duke for his accompaniment and assistance in such a difficult matter. Ian noticed that the heroine kept looking in one direction, waiting for something or maybe someone. He followed his gaze but did not notice anything unusual. And Layla wondered where Alicia was, because according to the plot, she would pass through this place. Aff was heard throughout the street. The heroine immediately recognized who the dog might belong to and told Ian to catch it. The cute puppy ended up in the Duke's arms. Although he had fulfilled Layla's request, but he had no idea why, at that very second he heard a woman's voice. Alicia, shouting and apologizing to passersby, asked them to catch the dog. The girl recognized her savior as Ian. Smiling sweetly, as all main characters can do, she began to thank the man. The Duke's heart could barely bear this moment, and smiling in response, he began to politely refuse praise. The heroine, who was watching this awkward dialogue, was also involuntarily touched by their behavior. In the original, there is a scene where Alicia finds a puppy and helps him return to his family. She loves animals very much, so she immediately rushes to help. It is this kindness that wins the hearts of the other characters, and it is no wonder that the whole story revolves around it. But according to the plot, the main character was not supposed to meet Ian in this place, so now a scene is born that was not in the book. And this means that the novel can still be rewritten in one's own way, Layla concluded solemnly. Having decided that the heroes needed to talk calmly in private, the girl left and continued her plans. On the way, her gaze caught a jewelry store. Namely, the pendant. It was not massive and made of pearls, ideal for the upcoming celebration. "I didn't expect to see you in this place," said a voice she wished she never heard again. Julian continued to criticize the heroine for squandering money again, although this should not have bothered him in the least. Without giving any sign that she was upset by his appearance, as far as possible, she greeted him. In response, he continued his insults with redoubled force. Why did he pick on the heroine? This scene wasn't even in the novel. If he didn't want to see her like that, then why did he even approach her? Then he remembered what he wanted to demand from Layla. "Don't you dare come near me at the spring ball," Julian said haughtily, raising his chin. The girl realized that she could no longer tolerate this humiliation. "No problem. In that case, I'll just choose another partner for myself," Layla retorted with dignity. Julian asked, breaking into a shout, who she was going to dance with, but it was clear that it was clearly not him. The lady calmly replied that she had not yet chosen, but she was not going to stand alone in the middle of the dancing crowd. If she, as the daughter of a count, does not dance at the state ball and simply freezes in place, rumors will spread that their family is not sufficiently devoted to the crown. But Julian was more worried not about this fact, but about who would dare to dance with such a hateful, again in his opinion, person as Layla. Only one person came to mind, Ian. Layla and he had been together a lot lately, and this put the Marquis in a difficult position, or maybe it even touched. Enraged by his own thoughts, he threatened that if she ever dared to make a fool of him, he would not forgive her. He left, meanly condemning the girl and leaving her alone with her thoughts. The ball began, the carriages slowly began to arrive, and the music had already started playing a long time ago. And our heroes had just left, and Ian had the opportunity to ask if she knew in advance that Alicia would be there. To this, Layla answered positively and asked herself how they conducted the conversation. The man was embarrassed, but told about his attempt to invite the main character to the ball. Showing genuine interest, Layla froze in anticipation of what would continue. She agreed, the Duke announced, beaming. The lady was as happy for him as for herself, because deep down she was quite the matchmaker. In the original novel, according to the plot, Gilbert was supposed to ask Alicia to dance at the spring ball, but since Ian did it earlier, the ending should change, and with luck, he will be lucky enough to avoid that scene. Gilbert arrived at the ball, standing out as always. Just by waving his hand in greeting, he had already captured the hearts of the public. The culmination of the celebrations dedicated to the day of the foundation of the state is the royal ball. Many aristocrats use this event to introduce their heirs to society. They bring them to the ball in the hope of making a profitable acquaintance. This is one of the aspects of the spring ball. That's probably why there's such nervousness in the air, because no matter what, almost all the girls are hoping to dance with Prince Gilbert. But the Marquis himself has not yet invited anyone, for now. At this point in the plot, the very incident that will lead to Gilbert asking Alicia to dance should happen, so if we manage to avoid this incident and Ian is with her, everything will go differently. Having put down a glass of sparkling champagne, the lady went in search of a suitable dance partner. Although Layla is not particularly liked by the main characters, she is a real beauty in appearance. Therefore, there will surely be at least one person who will like Layla. Looking around, the girl realized that the choice was too huge. She had only lived one day at a time until now and hadn't even imagined that there would be so many people here. The heroine wondered who to approach, because it's hard to tell anything about a person based on their appearance. She decided that the first thing she needed to do was just start a conversation with someone, but she didn't know what it was about. If the heroine had known that this would happen, she would have read more novels or watched films about medieval aristocracy. If Ian were nearby, she would feel much more confident with him. But you can't rely on him all the time. And besides, he needs to be with Alicia now. While Layla was considering whether it was wise to start a conversation about the weather, Ian himself approached her from behind. "Mrs. Layla," he addressed her. The heroine, who was not expecting him, was very frightened by the sudden voice. Ian noticed that the girl was marking time and decided to find out how she was feeling. A real good guy. But to his complete surprise, the lady began to scold him for abandoning Alicia because the dance was soon. Shocked by Layla's behavior, Ian began to justify himself by saying that there was time and she was exaggerating. "You looked like you needed help," the Duke said in his defense. His words touched the heroine deeply. It is not often in this world that she is shown such kindness. Even when he is with the one he loves, he still pays attention to others, which is why people like him become victims of other people's intrigues. Layla continued to insist that the man go to Alicia and she would find herself a partner. But the honest Duke was tormented by the promise to find her a match together. The heroine was already tired of repeating that everything was fine and that the main character couldn't be left alone. Therefore, in order to convince him exactly, I whispered in his ear the future events that were to come. According to the plot, Alicia must accidentally run into a waiter who spills red wine on her dress. After this, everyone in the palace will start laughing at her, not even hiding their actions. And, ashamed, she is about to leave. But then, just in time, Gilbert appears from the curtain. He will come to her to help and give her a new dress, and invite her to the cherished dance. This is where the story of Alicia and Gilbert begins. That's why Ian must never leave the main character alone and miss the chance. Layla, having reminded him once again that everything would be fine with her, still managed to convince the Duke with this story, and he went in search of Alicia. The heroine thought that maybe she should have told him about the development of the plot in advance, but how could she know how much it would affect further events? Having lost sight of Ian, the girl herself began to look for Alicia, but could not find her. And only when she looked back did she see a girl in a delicate pink dress, which undoubtedly suited her, but the Duke was not there yet, and Alicia was already heading towards her future problem. No one managed to stop the main character, and she still collides with the waiter, as was predetermined. But Layla couldn't let the plot take its course, and she rushed to help herself. But it was too late. The red liquid was already in the air and, according to the law of gravity, was heading downwards. Resigned to her fate, she closed her eyes and heard the sound of breaking glass, but also someone's hands tightly squeezing her shoulders. A voice from behind asked if the lady was okay. Turning around, Layla saw him, her savior. A young man with pretty features and chestnut hair that matched his suit perfectly. He was glad that the heroine was not harmed, but Layla did not remember this character in the novel. There was not much decoration, but there was also a sense of gentlemanly nobility about him. Ian ran up to them, expressing concern for the girl's safety. Layla assured and reassured him that everything was fine and wanted to introduce the young man. But when she turned around, she didn't see anyone. He had disappeared without a trace. She regretted that she did not have time to thank her savior for his help. A thin, almost inaudible voice called out to the heroes. It was Alicia. She noticed that the heroine tried to protect her and wanted to thank her. To this, Layla embarrassedly said that she was rather clumsy and only tripped awkwardly. And yet, if the lady had not supported the main character, everything could have ended very badly. Understanding this fact, Alicia continued to insist on her own, no matter how the lady denied it, and this embarrassed Layla. The heroine, in turn, was only glad that the main character did not spill wine on herself, and now she would be able to dance with Ian. "What's all the noise?" said an unfriendly voice. Layla whined to herself as she saw Julian's silhouette outlined in front of her. Immediately, as is his style, he began to condemn the girl for causing a stir, and even at such a celebration, and for completely losing her shame. Why is he clinging to her like a burdock? He should have gone his own way. She hasn't done anything bad. Continuing his attack, he began to say that she had deliberately arranged all this to annoy him, decided to anger him, and began to annoy Alicia. That's not true. Alicia tried to interrupt the mockery. Gathering all the strength she had and raising her chin, the main character blocked Layla with her body. This turn of events left Julian dumbfounded, unable to understand the girl's behavior. Sensing an advantage, Alicia shouted that he had crossed all boundaries and the lady had helped her. The man looked stupidly at the lady, still not understanding anything, and wanted to turn to Layla for support, forgetting that she was his victim. Alicia continued her story about how she almost collided with the waiter, but suddenly noticed a wine stain that still got on her lovely dress. She offered her help in exchange for salvation, although she would have done so even without this reason. The girls left, leaving the Duke and Marquis alone. The first one wanted to start a conversation, or rather ask the other to give Layla a chance, but he realized that it would most likely be useless, so he interrupted himself and also left. Meanwhile, the ladies began to wash away the unfortunate stain. Layla still felt uncomfortable, but Alicia insisted that since it was her fault, she had to help. But the dance was about to begin, and she chose the right moment to ask if she had a partner with whom she had already agreed. After all, it's the spring ball. Everyone believes the rumors and wants to dance with whoever they like. It can't be that Alicia doesn't know about it. The main character admitted that Ian invited her, but she thinks that he did not put any special meaning into it, because the Duke is very kind and he felt sorry for her. A baron's daughter who was not invited was a sad sight, she concluded. The heroine wanted to dispute this statement, but decided that it would be better for Ian himself to do so. By the end of the conversation, the dress was ready and shone like never before, and so did the owner. It's good that everything turned out well and no one noticed. Layla, although she was afraid to do it, still reported that the Duke was probably still waiting for Alicia. She believed the lady's words, and was even slightly glad that Ian was worried about someone like her. After thanking him one last time, Alicia went to look for him. Even if they deviated slightly from the plot, the main character does not perceive Ian as a man. Maybe after the dance, at least something will change. A couple of minutes later, Layla also left the cozy room, deciding that it was time to return to the banquet. As she walked down the corridor, she calculated that Ian was probably already dancing with Alicia, but at the turn, she met the culprit of her thoughts. He said that the girls had not returned. He became worried and went to them. But Alicia should have returned by now, which means they missed each other. It turns out that the main character was left alone, which should not happen in the near future. Realizing this, Layla, grabbing Ian, rushed to catch up with the girl. Running past the gazebo, the heroes found Alicia, but not alone. Gilbert, offering his hand, invited the girl to dance. There was still hope that the main character would refuse, but she took his hand and accepted the invitation. They were late, everything went according to script again. "Ian, I'm sorry if I'd kept a better eye on Alicia," Layla apologized, feeling guilty. The Duke told her not to worry too much, but the heroine still punished herself for her inattention, and time moves inexorably forward, and the time has come to dance. As in the novel, the couple Gilbert and Alicia were the most radiant and stood out from the rest. Ian could only watch them with envy. You couldn't look at him without longing, and how it must have been for him. The heroine felt awkward in front of the man. She was simply afraid that if she told him everything, the plot could go completely wrong. But she herself proposed an alliance to him. Now, hiding everything that happens in the novel from him is dishonest and ineffective, so the girl suggested that he arrange a strategic council. She will tell you what will happen next in the plot, and this time they will definitely get closer to Alicia. Layla assured him that there was still a chance to win the love war. Ian decided that he still owed the lady a favor and had to help her find a man who would suit her, a good-looking one. The heroine sighed with relief when he smiled, once again convinced of the man's strength of spirit. She wondered if the Duke might have known the young man in the brown suit. Here she finally remembered who her savior could be. It seemed he was one of Prince Gilbert's vassals. Just as the girl wanted to clarify her guess with Ian, the hateful voice was heard from behind again. Much to Layla's regret, the impudent man with golden hair once again appeared on their way. As usual, he immediately pounced on the heroine with accusations that she was hanging around Ian again. But suddenly, to everyone's surprise, even to himself, he invites her to dance. It was so unexpected on his part that Layla even grimaced, breaking away from her role as a decent lady. He himself didn't want to dance, and even like that, as if he was doing her a favor, he explained his actions by saying that his father would be indignant if he didn't dance with her. The girl really understood that there was no need for tension between their families and that, if they quarreled, her freedom could be restricted. Julian was also simply following the role of a decent groom. Perhaps she shouldn't have been so categorical, but she didn't want to dance with him and said so to his face. If the engagement was broken, it would be possible to change the plot. But Julian could not understand that he had been rejected by the one who was constantly running after him. He found the reason for this act in the fact that she decided to lure Ian in order to attract his attention. This conclusion, which he himself had come up with, made Julian smile smugly, and this conclusion completely threw the heroine off track. Julian, confident that he was right, continued to develop his thought, restoring his self-esteem. Ian made an attempt to stop the Marquis, but only became a new target for Julian. He reproached the Duke for trying to invite Layla to dance, although he knew that she was his fiancée. "What are you thinking? I didn't invite her anywhere, and she didn't lure me anywhere." Ian was also already going crazy from the stupidity of this man. And he ended by saying that only a smug ass could ask a girl to dance like that without thinking about the lady's feelings. To this, the Marquis replied that the choice of how to treat the bride was his personal business. Ian decided to end this ridiculous conversation and, taking Layla by the hand, got ready to leave. But Julian managed to grab the girl's other hand and pulled it sharply towards himself, causing pain to the heroine. And the Duke, in turn, grabbed the Marquis's hand, urging him to let go of the girl. The girl found herself in a very disadvantageous position when a war almost broke out for her hand. Julian was starting to lose, so he went to his trump card. "Why do you need to protect her? Are you really in love?" The words hung in the air and weren't going to fall. At these words, for the first time in a long time, Ian's face expressed genuine contempt. No one dared to speak. After some waiting, the Duke, squeezing his opponent's hand even tighter, finally said that Layla was his close friend. And if someone treats another rudely, anyone will stand up for him without fear of consequences. This only provoked the Marquis, who reproached him that it was not normal for an unmarried girl and a single man to be together so often, and even to the exclusion of her fiancé, that is, him. The situation was getting tense. The heroine could tell Julian the truth. He still wouldn't believe her. The main thing now is to get out of this mess, but she doesn't want to attract attention to herself at all. "Ian, you're a good guy. You probably took pity on Layla and decided to make friends." Julian continued to develop his thought. But the Marquis smugly decided that this still did not excuse him for such an offense. The Duke asked decisively why he hated Layla so much, since she hadn't done anything to him. And suddenly the girl realized that Layla no longer bullied anyone or did anything that would irritate Julian. Even if this is part of the plot of the novel, he could have easily ignored the heroine and everything. The question caught Julian off guard. He knew that this woman was evil and insidious, always pestering him at the wrong time, although now it was impossible to notice her doing so, but this was certainly part of her cunning plan. Convinced of this, Julian said that Layla was a cunning and unprincipled woman. It infuriated him that Ian kept meddling in things that weren't his business, even though he had nothing to do with it. If he continues like this, it will drive a wedge between Julian and Layla's families, which will be bad for both of them. Having said that, if any consequences arose, it would be entirely her fault. The Marquis left. The conversation with Julian was unpleasant, after which the heroes felt completely exhausted. The heroine could not understand why he did not simply break off the engagement and they would be free from each other. To which the man explained that it was not that simple, because finding someone who matched his title was not that easy. Find a girl of noble birth and suitable age, appropriate to the house of the Marquis of Holloway. That is why the choice fell on Layla. Despite the fact that the Bartwhistle family is just a count's family, they have succeeded in business, they have had a long-standing relationship, so everyone knew about the upcoming marriage. While the girl was lost in her thoughts, the music changed from cheerful to calm, for ballroom dancing. There was no need to look for Alicia. She and Gilbert were shining in the center of the hall, striking everyone with their beauty. The heroine was overcome with guilt again and felt discomfort. "Don't you feel offended just standing there and watching them?" Layla said awkwardly. To lighten the mood, she suggested dancing with someone. It was a ball after all, and it would be stupid to miss such a chance. "In that case, as a true gentleman, I must invite you properly," Ian said with a smile. Layla happily agreed, and they too headed to the ballroom stage. The heroes joined in the general dance and literally dissolved into it, enjoying the process. My head was spinning from the endless turns and music, but it only made me smile. When the dance was over, the heroes decided to take a break and go out to get some fresh air. While discussing a future plan to change the plot in their favor, the girl suddenly noticed a familiar silhouette on a nearby path. Realizing that this was her savior, she turned to Ian and asked if he knew him. But the man did not immediately understand who they were talking about. Many couples had left the building and were also walking. Just as he began to look closely, a voice called out to them. It turns out that Alicia was looking for them among the crowd of vacationing dukes and their couples, and finally found them. She asked if they had been dancing together, but Layla shook her head in protest, not wanting to further expose Ian. The heroine, on the contrary, even gave the man a chance to dance with Alicia and hinted to him about it. Having decided that the lovebirds would manage on their own from now on, and that she would be in their way at the moment, she left. And those same doves remained confused. Layla reflected that although this was not the first dance, in the original they did not dance at all. So we can say that this is already a big progress for her mission to change destiny. She got into her carriage, slightly hoping that she would survive the journey, and continued to think. And the girl was thinking about the young man whom she had lost sight of when he was talking to Gilbert, probably one of his close associates, and if so, Ian knows exactly who this man is. The heroine remembered how polite he was, how sensitive, a real gentleman, and was already imagining their next meeting. Was it really love at first sight? But stopping herself in time, she decided that she first needed to find out what kind of person he was. Meanwhile, Alicia and Ian finished their dance. The main character was glad of this opportunity because, as she said, they had not danced together since childhood. So, after a little more nostalgia for childhood days, it was time to say goodbye. But before leaving, Alicia expressed her desire to chat with Layla again in the future and hoped for Ian's help. The Duke agreed with the girl's opinion that it was especially easy to communicate with her today and promised to meet soon. And they said goodbye and parted. Walking along the path, Ian accidentally stumbled upon Gilbert and Julian, who were talking in the gazebo, but still noticed him. Moreover, they themselves involved him in the conversation. Gilbert needed to discuss something urgently with him and asked to give him just a minute, and he hinted to Julian to leave them. He, although displeased, obeyed the order and sat down on the far sofa. The prince explained that since the Duke had disciplined him, he was walking around gloomier than a storm cloud, but also agreed with what he had done. He himself already wanted to talk to him so that he would stop waving his title, but he was informed faster that Ian had beaten him to it. But the prince wanted to discuss something else, so he went straight to the point. "You will also be going to the Blue Moon Palace this year," Gilbert began his speech. Ian agreed, even though it wasn't a question, especially since he didn't have any other plans anyway. Gilbert was very pleased to be convinced of the Duke's words and said that he was going to invite Alicia. Julian heard a familiar name and said that Layla had mentioned her, saying that she was the Baron's illegitimate daughter and that she herself did not like her. But the prince was not embarrassed by this. He just wanted to say that he decided to invite Alicia. The Marquis remembered that this girl had previously lived in Ian's family home and asked if he was close to her. Julian was about to blurt out that he had also danced with her today, but the prince interrupted him by clapping his hands. With this, he summed up his decision to send a letter of invitation to Lady Alicia. Ian, as his friend and comrade, asked for one thing, to send an invitation to Layla as well. The Marquis was outraged by this proposal and did not understand why this woman should go with them. Gilbert reminded her that she was still his daughter-in-law, even if she had a difficult character, but he had to guide her on the right path. It was his duty. Julian was infuriated by the thought that if he started making a fuss, people would think he was beneath her. Ian said that Alicia herself wanted to make peace with Layla, to resolve all the misunderstandings because of which she had bullied her, and she would be much calmer if the girl was nearby. Agreeing with the Duke's opinion, the prince decided to also invite Layla to the summer residence. Meanwhile, the girl herself returned to the Bartwhistle estate. The lady's parents met her in the corridor and, one could say, they were furious. "You're late," said a cruel voice that belonged to the head of the house, and Layla's father, Marquis Bartwhistle. According to the plot, he is a businessman, constantly traveling around different regions on business. Therefore, the heroine did not expect that they would ever appear, but they could not be absent all the time. And yet she decided to greet them kindly, but in response she only received a slap in the face from her father. The girl did not expect such a low act, especially in relation to Layla, their own daughter. And the Marquis continued to scold her that, while they were gone, the servants had brought rumors of behavior that was extremely unbecoming for a lady, and also about her intention to break off her engagement to Julian of the Halluer family, regardless of her family. The mother asked her husband to stop after several more accusations and ordered him to bring ice. The novel didn't say anything about her parents, and the heroine had time to think that only her mother was worried about her, but she suddenly came up to her and whispered in her ear that she had given her such a beautiful face, but it was of no use. So they left, leaving their own child humiliated, and Layla could only swallow her resentment and return to the room, regretting to Layla that not only did she fall in love with that turkey Julian, but that the family was also crazy. This wasn't in the book, maybe it's some hidden information about the character, although Layla only appears on a few pages, she got a terrible fate. Everyone hates her, and her own family treats her like a soulless tool. She actually managed to escape death, and all the plot does is put shelves in the wheels. With this scenario, it turns out that even if she avoids death, Layla still won't be able to be happy. It's unfair. But she had already decided that she would become the happiest, so she couldn't give up, and taking paper and pen, she began to plan. She now had an ally in Ian to give advice to at their next meeting. After the spring ball, at which Gilbert shows interest in Alicia, he invites her to the country residence, the Blue Moon Palace, in the summer, where he takes Ian and Julian with him every year. And there, during a walk on a yacht, she accidentally falls into the water. He saves her and gives her artificial respiration, and upon waking up, the girl begins to see something more in him. Layla must prevent this. But for now, everything will have to be done secretly, so as not to be seen by the parents or to come up with something so convincing that it would make them shut up. There is a special place in the country for aristocratic meetings, Crown Palace, where young heirs and heiresses of noble families communicate, and some halls are open only for certain families. Just one of these halls is the Rose Garden, where Gilbert usually hangs out, and if so, Ian will probably be there too. That's where the heroine headed, since he urgently needed to convey a message with further actions. And so it happened. The Duke was walking in the long corridors. Having greeted each other, Layla did not hesitate and got straight to the point. "You will soon go to the Palace of the Blue Moon." The heroine began to implement her cunning plan. She explained that she had written out all the events that were supposed to happen there, and he would be able to get Alicia, all the while waving the scroll in front of Ian's face. However, he suddenly stopped the lady's speech and, embarrassed, asked a question. "Will you come with me to the Blue Moon Palace?" the Duke asked awkwardly, but at the same time hopefully. A few days later, the girls were already on their way to that very castle that everyone dreams of visiting. Alicia thanked Layla, but she didn't understand why. The girl explained that she simply enjoyed the heroine's company. She would feel out of place alone. Let's go back 3 days ago, when the man invited Layla to the summer residence. Ian admitted there was another reason, but the welcoming voice of the approaching Alicia did not let him finish. She was not alone. Gilbert accompanied the lady and was also glad to meet her. He invited Layla, as he promised, and Alicia said that if the lady went, then she would go too. And then the heroine felt pressure from Gilbert and realized that she had no choice. But since the prince was going, that meant that the same person could also be there, and realizing this, Layla happily accepted the offer. That's how she ended up in the same carriage with Alicia, heading to the Blue Moon Palace. This time the heroine will cope, and the main characters will not be together. A few hours later, the girls arrived. They noticed that the wind was much fresher than in the capital, and appreciated it. It was not for nothing that the place was chosen as a summer residence. The castle itself, although people only come here in the summer, was in perfect condition. "Welcome to the Blue Moon Palace. You must be tired from the journey," Gilbert greeted the girls who arrived. "You've both arrived already. The next second Ian appeared, no less happy about their arrival. Layla noticed for herself how the Duke simply glowed with happiness at the sight of Alicia. The prince suggested that they go inside and asked the servants to take their things to the designated rooms. From the outside, of course, it was luxurious, but inside it turned out to be something special. Especially the shining chandelier in the middle of the hall caught the eye. But the heroine, realizing that she had so easily succumbed to luxury, pulled herself back, because that was not why she had come here. Her job is to keep the plot from going according to the book's plan, to make sure that nothing romantic develops between Gilbert and Alicia. They are in alliance with Ian. If only she will benefit, then it will be unfair to him, and also, the heroine is simply obliged to at least find out the name of that young man. The prince showed the ladies their rooms from among the many others among which one could get lost, and then he said that once they had laid out their things, they should come to the living room. They were already preparing dinner there. Having wished him a good rest, he left, and Layla noticed how delicately he supported Alicia's words. A real MGG, but Ian also possessed this quality no worse. She asked if he had read her letter, but saw only the Duke's upset face. He was worried about the possibility of predetermined events, so the heroine supported him and even said that in extreme cases, she would do artificial respiration herself, not giving Gilbert a chance. The Duke doubted the girl's experience, but she assured him that she had already done a lot of mental training. Ian felt the girl's positivity and hope was born in him again, and the heroine, seeing the man's smile, seized the moment and reminded him of her request. Gilbert, although he behaves in a friendly manner, is still a prince. He has many servants and assistants who often change, but the lady is sure that he is here now, and as soon as she sees him, she will inform. But before that, she decided to go to her room first and tidy herself up. After a while, Alicia knocked and asked Layla to go into the living room with her, and she agreed. It seemed she was embarrassed to go alone. But, having arrived at the place, the mask fell off and the main character looked around the room with all her eyes. Gilbert and Ian were already in the room, as well as, to their great but predictable regret, Julian. Holding back her emotions, the girl said hello, already expecting him to attack her. But he did nothing of the sort, to the heroine's surprise, and she decided that he was holding back in front of the prince. However, since the Marquis did not pester her with reproaches, she was thankful for that. Layla decided to sit down in the next seat next to Alicia and suddenly noticed that the guy who saved her at the ball was now receiving an order from Gilbert. The Duke understood the girl's hints and followed her gaze to see the young man. But his face took on a look of confusion. This could not help but confuse the heroine, and doubts crept into her. The heroine immediately hurried to him to figure out if she had misunderstood. She asked if Ian was right about the guy he was thinking of, but there was no mistake, and now it was because of him that he couldn't put words together. The Duke was unable to tell anything about him. They were interrupted by Julian's question, and after that he reported that the prince invited Alicia to walk along the coast. Suddenly, the heroine realized that he was going to take a ride on the very yacht where the disaster would happen. Julian voiced his guess that, judging by the way he was acting, he was serious about winning Alicia's favor. And everyone looked at their couple, chatting happily, distanced from everyone else. Layla noticed how sadly and jealously Ian looked at them. It was not worth leaving them alone. The heroine left, saying that she would go into the room for an umbrella since they were going for a walk. But walking along the long corridor, Julian caught up with her and called out to her. The heroine did not understand why he had specifically followed her. Had something really happened, and he wanted to talk in private. He awkwardly began the conversation by saying that it seemed the Marquis and his wife had returned from their trip. The girl confirmed this and said that they would stay in the capital for some time, but for some reason this fact made Julian uneasy. Without showing it, he urged Layla to get ready and left with his thoughts, which he did not voice. The heroine did not understand his actions. Did he really come seriously to tell her to hurry up? Julian, returning back to the hall, did not understand what had just happened. He doesn't care about Layla. He just heard from his father that the Marquis and his wife had returned, and he remembered that the head of Bartwhistle seemed to dote on his daughter. But one day he saw with his own eyes how he hit her hard on the cheek, calling her a scoundrel. He also noticed that Layla's behavior had become strange lately, so he became interested, Julian convinced himself. After some time, the company finally got out of the building for a walk. Layla and Alicia were amazed by the beauty and large size of the yacht. It was the first time they had seen such a ship. "My swallow," Gilbert said enthusiastically. "If the weather is good tomorrow, we'll take a ride on her." The girl tensed up. Everything began to happen exactly as in the plot of the novel. The main character invited Layla to go with them, and she reluctantly agreed. But she couldn't help but try to ruin the trip and pointed to the gathering clouds, saying that tomorrow would most likely be cloudy and it would be dangerous to go out to sea in the coming days. However, Gilbert refuted the girl's worries and reassured her that even if the sea became rough, his ship was very strong. "If that's the case, then there's no need to worry." Layla retreated. It would be more expensive to contradict the prince's words, but the heroine hoped that her warning would at least make them a little wary, and then we'll see how the situation goes. And yet, looking at the others, deep down, she realized that she too wanted to have fun with everyone. But from the very morning, this corset was wildly tight and caused discomfort, and now the sun was so hot. Layla gets the idea to go and find a place to rest, but suddenly she stumbles. Not having time to group herself, the girl was preparing for a fall that did not happen. "Are you okay?" asked the brown-haired boy, not letting the girl fall to the ground. "The hero saved her again? Is it possible for someone to help so many times in a row? Is it really fate?" Layla thanked him, and while she had the opportunity, tried to at least find out his name. "I am Master Gilbert's servant. My name is Elliot Winter." Her savior introduced himself. The heroine did not remember him appearing in the novel. Several names of his close associates were mentioned, of course, but apparently he was not one of the key characters. If so, then it means he doesn't have a strong influence on the development of the plot, which suits her. Layla also introduced herself, recalling his heroic rescue, and thanked Elliot. He modestly accepted the gratitude and noted that it must be uncomfortable for a girl to walk in such shoes, especially in such heat. Therefore, if she didn't mind, he suggested that they rest a little in the shade, and he would bring something refreshing. The heroine, of course, agreed. Arriving at the place, Layla was enchanted by the surrounding beauty of nature and surroundings. Elliot brought the most popular desserts and drinks in the capital at the moment. They really looked delicious. I really wanted to try them. The girl asked the guy to join in, but he politely abstained since he was on duty, which delighted her. The young man asked the heroine to keep this a secret from his master, and admitted that in fact he has a terrible sweet tooth, and he specially ordered those desserts that he himself loves. The guy initially thought that once everyone tried it, he would be able to afford himself a piece too. "But if the lady didn't mind, I would like to join her." Extending his little finger, he suggested they have a sweet little secret. "I swear I'll keep this a secret." Layla happily wrapped her little finger around his finger, and they continued to enjoy the delicious desserts together. As expected from Gilbert's confidant, so attentive, thought of everything, and also treated me so caringly. What a wonderful person. My heart was jumping in my chest. Could this feeling really be that very same love? But the girls' company was already approaching them, and it was time to stop this prank. Alicia happily pounced on Layla and began asking how she spent her time, and Elliot, with a final wink reminding them of their secret, already put on the mask of Gilbert's servant. Only Ian followed him with a displeased look, and time moved towards evening. Since the heroine was reborn, she had never once admired the sunset so calmly. She was remembering all the good things that had happened today, but her thoughts were interrupted by the Duke. She began to tell how the young man saved her from falling, and then suggested that she take a rest. But the man interrupted her flow of words again. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you this in time, but Elliot is not right for you," Ian finally said. Layla was surprised because she had already gotten to know him better and thought completely differently. Just as the Duke was about to explain his position, he was interrupted again, not allowing him to speak. Alicia ran up to them to invite Layla to the large bathhouse she had recently learned about. The heroine really wanted to relax after a hard day, but she felt awkward at the thought of leaving Ian again. But she still didn't want to raise this topic in front of the main character, so the lady agreed, asking the man to tell her all the details later. The baths turned out to be not just large, but enormous and decorated with pictures inside. It turns out that Gilbert sent servants to help them prepare for bathing. Alicia was very confused by this, and in fact Layla was too, she just didn't show it. So she let them go, saying that they could handle it themselves. Even after diving into the water, the lady continued to think about what exactly Ian wanted to tell about Elliot. She was incredibly curious, but at the same time a little scared. "Thank you for intervening then?" Alicia suddenly interrupted the flow of thoughts, as she knew how to do. But the girl could be understood. She was not used to the help of servants, and now, when the opportunity presented itself, she was embarrassed to refuse. Alicia noticed a decline in Layla's good mood and was worried that she might be ill. The heroine didn't even notice how her face changed. She was too immersed in thoughts about Ian and lost concentration, so she decided to start a conversation. And suddenly, the idea came to her to take advantage of the moment again and recommend the Duke to Alicia. The girl casually asked her if she had ever fallen in love with anyone. The main character jumped from this question. It caught her so off guard. That's why Layla started first, and said that she herself has been constantly thinking about one person lately, but she can't understand if it's love. And again, returning to her question, she asked if anyone evoked similar feelings in her. Feeling comfortable, Alicia shared her thoughts that she had no right to love, since she was the illegitimate daughter of a baron, and therefore did not even allow herself to think about love. Layla completely forgot that the girl was an illegitimate daughter and was accepted into the family only because the legitimate heir died. Alicia probably feels like an outcast in this house. Although Alicia is usually so bright and kind, this is the side of her that was expressed most in the original plot. Don't talk nonsense. The fact that you were born out of wedlock is not important at all. Layla decided to support the girl. Alicia was very happy with these words from the lady and decided to shift the focus and voiced her guess that Layla's love was Julian. Because of Elliot, she completely forgot about this scoundrel, so she only confessed that their engagement was simply an agreement between families. Deciding that she no longer wanted to discuss the Marquis, she said that she felt dizzy and left. Meanwhile, the weather turned bad. It started raining and the palace was plunged into darkness. The girl had already returned to the room, where she was met by servants who offered her to change clothes. The tired lady agreed and was dressed in a nightgown that looked more like a thin dress. The rain hit the glass and only grew stronger, as if foreshadowing something, and suddenly a clap of thunder resounded throughout the palace. The lights suddenly went out, probably caused by lightning, and the building became dark. The servants assumed that there was a problem with the electrical network and went to check. The heroine was left completely alone in a dark room, and her anxiety did not leave her. The servants had not returned for a long time, and the girl decided to go out, but having not walked even 5 meters, she collided with someone. Having become accustomed to the darkness, she was able to make out her obstacle. It turned out to be Mr. Elliot. He didn't want to scare the lady, but everything happened unexpectedly. He also said that the magic crystal that was used in the generator had cracked. As the servants had assumed, it was already being repaired, and for now he suggested waiting in the living room. On the way they passed by Alicia's room, she apparently heard them and looked out from behind the door. She was glad to meet her acquaintances, especially Layla, and stopped worrying about the darkness. The young man also invited her to go with them into the living room, and she happily agreed. But Layla was amazed by his kindness and boundless courage. Now the three of them walked along long and gloomy corridors, which the flashlight in the guy's hands tried with all his might to illuminate. The heroine was so worried just 5 minutes ago, but as soon as she met Elliot, she immediately felt calm. So why did Ian say that he was not right for her? Finally, they came to the living room, and all the men had already gathered there and were waiting for them. The girls were happily welcomed and engaged in conversation. Layla felt Julian's gaze on her, but catching it with his eyes, he immediately turned away. The heroine judged that he was not pleased with her company. Gilbert was the center of the conversation and tried to dispel the girls' fears by saying that since this was the case, maybe they should enjoy the atmosphere. There were so many candles, it was even somehow magical, so Alicia suggested playing some kind of game, and everyone began to suggest their options. How about a hunting game, the prince suggested, and everyone became inspired, even Julian, who was against it. But the heroine didn't know the rules, since there was no mention of such in the original, and even less so in life. Layla didn't try to be cunning, and said directly that she didn't know the rules, and asked to be told them. The Marquise only said that this game is the most popular now, but this information did not help Layla figure it out. Since everyone was here, they decided to repeat the rules for everyone. First, civilians and one villain are chosen by lot, who mixes with them and together perform tasks. The villain's task is to hunt down the inhabitants one by one and eliminate them, but without giving himself away. If the villain eliminates everyone, he wins, and if the residents reveal his identity, victory is theirs. Layla realized that this game was something like Mafia. only with tasks. But suddenly Gilbert says that even though there are 5 of them, it is still not enough, so he invites Elliot to play. The heroine did not expect such a turn of events, but was very happy about it, as was the young man himself, it seems. Unlike Ian, who was extremely unhappy. And yet something about this game bothered the guy, and having understood the reason, the prince allowed him to put down the titles for the duration of the game and participate seriously. The girl was incredibly happy and decided that this was her chance to become closer to him. Roses were brought into the room and one was attached to each person's chest. They couldn't really hunt, so if someone's flower was picked, that dead person would have to go to the cemetery, that is to the dining room, and this living room would be the no-blade zone. The courtiers prepared lots in the form of pieces of paper, and everyone drew one to find out their role. Layla got the status of a civilian, and she was happy that if she behaved like everyone else, nothing would happen. Maybe she would even be able to talk to Elliot. The whole thing took 1 hour, it was very exciting, so the girls decided to team up. Leaving the safe zone, they walked out into the darkness, with only the lanterns illuminating the way. But then the ladies realized that their tasks were in different rooms. The heroine needed to go to the library and Alicia to the greenhouse. Of course, it was dangerous, but in order to complete the quests in an hour, we had to split up and act alone. Layla reached her place. She needed to find one specific book among all the books. It turned out to be easy to find it. It stood out with its color, and I was already happy with the easy execution, when a sound was heard from behind. Did the villain manage to get through, so she decided to hide. But then suddenly, in complete silence, someone said hello near the girl's ear, and this scared her very much. Calming down, she heard Elliot laugh, amused by the lady's sweet reaction. This sincere smile made Layla feel embarrassed, and her heart was ready to jump out. The girl was telling me that she had broken up with Alicia, and suddenly the bell rang, meaning that time was coming to an end. The heroine wanted to stay with the guy for at least a little longer and suggested hiding together in a safe zone. But she miscalculated the distance and stood too close to the young man, so that just a little more and they would touch. Too close. But Elliot came even closer, which caused a storm of emotions, and that same obsessive thought about a kiss came out. Layla gave in forward. "Sorry, but I'm a villain and it's time for you to go to the grave." The heroine opened her eyes and saw a rose in his hand. Her rose. The girl scolded herself for her naivety, but admitted that she was more upset by what didn't happen than by the defeat. The guy explained how to get to the game cemetery and apologized for deceiving the lady. Layla said that she wasn't angry. It was just a game, and he exhaled happily because he was afraid that she would be offended. And here again this sweet face broke the heroine's heart with such a smile. How can you be angry here? Arriving at the local cemetery, the girl found Ian sitting there. He too fell into Elliot's trap. He had been following him from the very beginning, and as soon as he turned around, he had already plucked his flower. But the heroine was only touched by the guy's cunning and told how he also picked her rose. And then, this is his face, as if he did something wrong. Well, how can you be angry? She can already forgive him for anything. Seeing how Layla spoke dreamily about the young man, the Duke only became upset. "Mistress Layla," Ian began awkwardly, since there was no longer any time to waste. The fact was that Elliot was getting married soon. The girl expected that the guy might have dark secrets, which is why the man reacted that way, but she never expected that the reason was completely different. It turned out he was getting married this fall. Her family was not connected to this union, so it was not surprising that she did not know. This is what the Duke meant when he said he was not right for her. The problem was his family situation. But maybe this is a marriage of convenience and they don't love each other like she and Julian do, but Ian has refuted her last hope. Elliot's fiancée is a relative of Gilbert's, and she has royal blood in her veins, and they have known each other for a long time, and there is something more between them than just a contract. "Layla, I'm sorry." The man felt guilty. If only he could have found out earlier. But the heroine herself understood that Ian was not guilty of anything. He did not need to worry about it. The girl gathered her remaining strength and forced a smile, saying that she was, of course, offended, but her feelings had not yet developed into something serious. "There is no point in loving someone who already has a partner," the lady said, hiding the bitterness in her voice. It hurt so much, but she kept saying that everything was okay. She just had to find someone else. But the tears were still about to flow, so Layla decided to go to the restroom to avoid continuing the conversation. After saying once more that she was completely fine, she left. But Ian knew she had been pretending all this time, and he mentally begged her not to pretend to be happy with such a sad face. It would be better if she blamed him for everything, said the Duke, unable to cope with his feeling of guilt. And Layla continued to reproach herself. She should have thought at least a little, and then this situation would not have happened. She should have had a proper conversation with Ian from the start, but she was too excited about finding someone she liked even more than she imagined. Lost in her thoughts, the girl did not notice a man turning and crashed into him. Julian managed to catch her in time, but noticed a face full of sadness, on which the tears had not yet dried. "Are you crying?" he asked seriously and carefully, although the answer was already clear. But the lady just waved it off, saying that it was just his imagination, since it was dark here, and ran away. Returning to the dining room due to the game death, Julian met Ian alone there. She was close enough for the Marquis to have a good look at her, and he certainly wasn't imagining things, but Layla had been with the Duke the whole time. Julian decided to attack. He looked so harmless. You wouldn't say that he was capable of hurting someone else's bride. Ian knew he was right. He was to blame for Layla's suffering, but he wasn't going to listen to accusations from the man who constantly bullied her. "But if you are so worried about your bride, why not be more gentle?" The Duke answered him, and lightning appeared between them. But the quarrel was interrupted by the light suddenly turning on. And Gilbert and Alicia burst into the dining room, saying that she had defeated the villain Elliot and become the winner. But the Marquis ignored this and left, saying that he had gone after Layla. The girl had already returned to the room and was sadly looking at her reflection in the mirror. She felt like a complete idiot, and her eyes continued to water, bitter tears streaming down her beautiful face. This was not her first life, but her feelings were stirred up because of a person she knew nothing about. The same mistake again. But Elliot is not an ex. It's good that Ian stopped her in time. She will need to thank him properly. Opening the door, the heroine met Julian on the threshold, who seemed to be waiting for her, but for some reason did not enter. Layla assumed that the game was probably over by now. The Marquis confirmed this and confidently stated that this was another trick of Gilbert's to get closer to Alicia. So he also noticed, the prince doesn't even hide his intentions. Suddenly, Julian came close to her ear and whispered that she better not be so friendly with him. Seeing the confusion on the girl's face, he explained that he meant Ian in his words. The heroine realized that Julian still did not trust them, although this was quite natural if it came to light that his fiancé was spending time with another man, then unpleasant rumors could start. "This is my friend," Layla stated firmly, making it clear that she was not going to change anything. The Marquis did not deny such a possibility, but society might think quite differently, all for the sake of gossip. "I don't care what people say about me," added the Marquis, and the heroine wondered if he was really worried about her. Cutting off the conversation, Julian said that they had been expected in the dining room for a long time and they needed to hurry. Indeed, as soon as Layla entered the room, Alicia pounced on her with hugs and told her about her victory. But Elliot approached them and interrupted the main character's stormy speech. He apologized for his trick, even though it was just a game. The heroine insisted that he was not at all guilty and in any case forgave him. The young man thanked her for understanding. As an apology, the guy promised to bring her very tasty sweets. The girl did not refuse such a sweet offer, on the contrary, she did not even hope for it. And Ian, watching all this from the side, could not help but worry about Layla, who was again led by his pretty face. He already wanted to go to them and sort things out, reminding the heroine about his marriage, but Julian stopped him in time. Julian recalled how he had brought her to tears and demanded to know how. "If only I could have told Layla everything earlier, she wouldn't have had to be sad," Ian only whispered. The Marquis realized that the Duke was not even hiding his guilt, and was finally convinced that he should not be allowed near his wife. The next day, a strong wind arose, but the company still gathered on the open balcony. When everyone finally gathered, Gilbert announced his offer to go for a ride on the ship. As expected from Alicia, she beamed at the mere thought of that yacht, without thinking about the consequences. It was dangerous to go out to sea in such a wind, and it was necessary to somehow hint about this, but Elliot got ahead of her and voiced her thoughts. To which the prince replied that he had already made a flight today, and everything was fine. Such a breeze would not harm his ship. They might not drown, but it would rock them like an amusement park ride, but Gilbert could no longer be convinced. The ship will not be damaged, but the weather will gradually worsen. It will start to rock, and Alicia will fall into the sea. But the main character didn't even think that danger awaited her. If this really happens, we will have to take that very step. The yacht set sail from the shore. As expected, the wind did not subside, but it was worth admitting that there were beautiful views from the deck. But the waves continued to rise, and sometimes the water even touched the girls' dresses. Unexpectedly, Alicia suggested that Layla was afraid of the sea, and therefore was against the boat trip. The lady realized that this was her chance to always stay close to her and confirmed her guess. Now it will be easy as pie to be close to the main character during the entire walk, and even if she starts to fall, she will definitely have time to save her. That's what the heroine thought, but maybe because she didn't get enough sleep, she felt unwell and needed to sit down and rest. But she couldn't. She couldn't leave Alicia alone to her fate. We'll have to be patient a little longer. Ian kept his eyes on Layla from that moment on, even while playing cards, still worried about her condition. While Julian kept his eyes on the Duke, noticing his every movement. Just as the man wanted to move away, the ship began to rock violently on the raging waves. The wind raised a series of high waves, and the yacht was stormy, succumbing to them. The moment has come. Alicia found herself near the sides, and it seems she is about to lose her balance. Without wasting a second, Layla grabbed the main character and tried to keep her from falling. But there wasn't enough strength. The girl's hand slipped. Luckily, Gilbert, who was running as fast as he could, managed to intercept her and save her from falling. Breathing a sigh of relief that Alicia was okay, Layla was completely exhausted from the physical and mental strain. The next moment, her friends were already shouting her name at the top of their lungs for some reason. She realized that she was falling into the sea. The heroine couldn't breathe, because on the surface, she was so surprised that she didn't have time to hold her breath. "We need to help her quickly," the prince shouted to his subordinates. But turning around, Gilbert saw Ian running and jumping into the arms of the blue sea. Julian was in great shock from the Duke's actions. He did not expect that he was even ready to risk his life for Layla. And the man continued to swim towards the heroine, sinking deeper and deeper. The fluffy dress got wet and pulled the girl to the bottom, but the Duke was more agile and caught Layla. He pulled her onto the sandy shore, saving her from this nightmare. When she woke up, the heroine only said that she tried to protect Alicia, but ended up falling overboard herself. A pitiful sight. But Ian forbade her to say such a thing to the lady because he understood that he had almost lost her forever and hugged her tightly. "You put yourself in danger. There's nothing to laugh about. You should take better care of yourself." He was afraid that she might disappear again and put herself in danger. Seeing that the thin fabric of the dress had become almost transparent from the water, he politely turned away. But realizing that Layla was shaking, he found a solution. The man took off his shirt and threw it over hers. He told the girl again not to take any more risks, because it wasn't worth it, even for his sake. Ian first saved her, but now he is angry, and this touched the heroine. They decided that they needed to move slowly, because everyone must be worried about them. To say they were worried is an understatement. They ran, almost tripping, and carried towels to the victims. Layla, of course, said she was fine as she accepted a dry towel from Alicia. Gilbert began to praise the Duke for his excellent reflexes and heroism despite the danger. "We shouldn't have boarded the ship in the first place," Ian said reproachfully and walked away, leaving everyone behind with a feeling of guilt. He returned to the room and thought for a long time about why Layla worried him so much. And the girl herself took a hot bath to warm up, wondering why Ian was so angry. Returning to her room, she breathed in the fresh air by the window and then decided that she would have to visit him later. Suddenly there was a knock on the door. Layla thought it was Alicia, but she was wrong. Julian was standing near the door. He didn't go inside, but only looked at her, as if trying to notice every little detail. "You seem to be okay," the Marquis stated, and was about to leave. The heroine wondered why he had suddenly come and expected that maybe he would say something else, and that's what happened. Julian said that he wanted to make sure that she was not hurt. That's why he came. And this touched the heroine. But in the end, he added out of spite that he was actually worried about his parents, who would make a scandal if they found out about this incident. Layla was upset because she had just begun to think good things about the Marquis, but she still thanked him sarcastically, and he smiled at this. The Duke was in his room at this time, but did not even turn on the light. Such an atmosphere corresponded to his state of mind. But then Julian burst in without knocking, sat down opposite him, and warned him to stay away from Layla. Such conversations had already taken place between them, but this time the Marquis was serious. Julian, although he was a close friend, had no right to tell him what to do, so Ian expressed his opinion, literally admitting that he was not indifferent to Layla. Meanwhile, Alicia decided to visit her friend and met her in the hallway. Layla said that thanks to the Duke she was not harmed, and she suddenly assumed from these words and his actions that Ian probably loved the heroine. The girl understood that this was impossible and wanted to resolve the misunderstanding before it was too late, but she saw the Duke approaching them. "Alicia, I love you," he said seriously, coming close to the main character. But what she would answer, Layla could not predict. Layla was shocked and tense because this was not in their plan, and everything they were trying for depended on Alicia's words. The main character herself was no less amazed than the lady, but a slight blush betrayed her embarrassment. Why did Ian decide to act so suddenly and so drastically and desperately? "Sorry, you're more like a brother to me," Alicia said, looking uncomfortable as she answered. But the Duke was in even more pain, and now the hope of meeting her had finally left him. However, he still collected his thoughts and, forcing a smile, managed to thank her for the honest answer. The man also said, already turning away, that in the future he would cherish her as a family member. Having asked not to take his words to heart, the Duke left, as if he was expected. But the heroine couldn't leave him like that, so she went after him and, having caught up with him, called out to him. After waiting for him to finally pay attention to her, she began to interrogate him about this situation. She reminded him that they were an alliance and needed to work together to succeed, but Ian interrupted her. "Let's disband our alliance," the man suddenly said, and there was sadness in his eyes. These words trapped Layla. She didn't know what to do and how best to proceed. Having finished their conversation, they went to their rooms. This night was very long. The girl was constantly plagued by bad thoughts, so she couldn't fall asleep. She kept remembering Ian's confession and cruel refusal. Although Alicia didn't want to hurt him, these thoughts tormented the heroine, but now she didn't have a single proposal. Naturally, after this, on the following day, the atmosphere at the table became tense. There was one last day left for arrival at the castle, and everyone would be leaving, and Layla still didn't know what kind of relationship they had now. An unexpected knock on the door pulled her out of her inner thoughts. It was a servant who brought a message from the Count. Her father wrote that the autumn festival was approaching and insisted that she wear her most luxurious dress and show others how valuable she was to the Holloway house. The courtier reported that preparations had already begun and that tomorrow they needed to go to the shops. Having received her father's order, Layla was now thinking sarcastically about how a beautiful dress should prove her worth, because no one would even look at her, but rumors could cause problems, so it was better to be on the safe side. The Autumn Festival is one of the main national events, a harvest festival, and it is at this festival that the prince confesses his love to Alicia. But Gilbert is a prince, and the main character, although the daughter of a baron, her mother is only a mistress. The gap between their statuses is the main obstacle to their love, but Gilbert will still confess to her, and Alicia will begin to think about her feelings for him. The girl decided it was necessary to write another letter to Ian about further events, but she remembered that their duet was no longer there, and the lady became upset again. The next day, the lady had already returned home to the estate and went shopping as planned, but was very surprised by what she saw. For the first time, such a large selection of dresses appeared before her, all of which were not inferior to each other, as if they were having their own competition. Layla, of course, admitted that they were beautiful, but there was still too much luxury. The lady began to sort through all the dresses in search of something more modest. And suddenly the bells above the shop door rang. Someone entered inside, and the girl turned around. She saw Alicia and the Duke, but they were together and happily discussing something. The main character noticed Layla and greeted her warmly, and then began to complain that they hadn't seen each other for a long time, and that she was lonely. The girls really hadn't seen each other since the resort, but the heroine was more confused by the fact that they came together. The Duke said that Alicia wanted to have her dress altered, although she had someone who could give her a new one, but she didn't want to listen to him. The lady did not immediately understand who the man was talking about, because earlier he had grimaced at the very name of Gilbert. The main character awkwardly whispered that the prince might have invited her with completely different intentions. Layla didn't quite understand what the girl was talking about, so Ian explained that the prince had invited Alicia to be his official partner at the autumn festival. But the girl did not let the Duke finish his speech, shouting in embarrassment for him not to tease her anymore. Alicia admitted that she wanted the heroine to find out first, but the Duke was there and saw everything faster. It all looked very strange. The tension had disappeared somewhere. Why does Ian smile like that when he was rejected? Literally had his feelings trampled. Doesn't he love Alicia? And she certainly knows it. Layla didn't want to spoil the fun and knew she shouldn't ask about what had happened between them. The main character, without hiding her smile, admitted that she wanted to know who the Duke liked. It seemed like the ground had gone out from under her feet when the girl heard her cruel words. The mood in the room changed dramatically. The girl could no longer contain the storm inside herself. "Don't you think it's a little heartless?" the lady said, already in despair and reproach. And the main character, apparently, did not understand what was happening at all, and looked at Layla with incomprehension. Here, the heroine realized that she had said too much about her emotions, but they were still raging and could break out at any moment. Therefore, in order not to make the situation even worse, I hurried to leave the store without picking up anything. Alicia didn't want to leave on such a bad note and asked her not to leave. But the lady did not hear, or perhaps did not want to listen to the girl at that moment. Of course, she regretted the hurtful words she had spoken, but it was too awkward to go back. The carriage would arrive for her only in a couple of hours, so the heroine decided to take a walk and distance herself from the bad feeling. But her thoughts caught up with her, and now she was accusing Ian of also deciding to play along with her. Why is he acting as if nothing happened at all? He likes Alicia, but after her refusal, he still helps her. Moreover, it seemed like he was trying to introduce her to the prince. Layla could not understand this at all and did not want to put up with such an attitude towards him. Walking quickly along the path, she seemed to be running away from reality, and suddenly a carriage drove past her. The heroine noticed her and slowed down, and the transport stopped near the girl. She knew who the carriage belonged to, so she was ready when he came out. Julian jumped off her elegantly and, straightening up, walked businesslike towards the girl. The Marquis looked at Layla appraisingly and frowned. The girl hesitated. She didn't know what to do. She had no time to talk to him now. So the lady waved it off, saying that he had nothing to worry about and wanted to leave, but Julian managed to intercept her hand. "I'll take you. Get in," the man suddenly said, holding out his hand to make it easier for her to get inside. The heroine continued to doubt, because this was not part of her plans, but she could not come up with a convincing reason to refuse. Layla had to agree, although not of her own free will. Rejecting the Marquis was not the best decision. They got into the carriage and set off, an awkward silence hanging in the air. The heroine felt uncomfortable and regretted that she had not walked home. Julian was the first to break the silence and asked if she had chosen a dress for the festival. The girl tried to somehow avoid the question, but in the end she admitted that she had not yet decided. However, the parents have already prepared several options, so all that remains is to choose the most inconspicuous dress from them, but this will most likely take a whole day. Julian clearly pronounced one color, red. The heroine did not understand why, out of all the shades, he chose this one. What was so special about this color? Before she had time to ask, the Marquis began to tell about the annual tradition. Gilbert would be in green, Ian in blue, and he in red. So Layla had to dress to match him. This would show the greatness of their union. The lady assumed that this was the Count's order, since it was very beneficial to him. But the man dissuaded her, saying that she was mistaken. If this is not so, then why does he help her? He hates Layla to the depths of his heart. Soon the carriage arrived, and they were met by a servant who was concerned about the lady's imminent return. Julian ordered him to tell the Count that this year he would choose his wife's dress himself. The servant obeyed and went off to carry out the task, and the wife herself was worried about his zeal. Finally, the Marquis said that he would come for her tomorrow and ask that she be ready. The girl didn't have time to react in any way, as she was shocked by such attention from him. Julian left in his carriage on business, and Layla did not say anything goodbye. The heroine continued to stand in place. Another servant approached her and invited her to go home. The heroine did not understand what had happened to the impudent and hypocritical Marquis. Having returned to the room, she decided to drink some tea and calm down, if, of course, this was even possible in her situation. Layla still couldn't believe that tomorrow she would be choosing a dress for the festival with Julian. But I was even more worried about that action in front of Alicia. Her face at that moment was so surprised. The girl regretted it. She shouldn't have treated the main character so cruelly. She was probably offended by her. In fact, the heroine herself did not know why she was so angry, so much so that she could not control her emotions. She was angry that Alicia asked Ian, who had recently confessed his love to her, for help in love affairs. And she couldn't understand the Duke, who accepted it so easily because they were going to help him win the girl's favor. And he just went and confessed to her without any preparation, which gave the feeling that all her efforts were worthless. Of course, Ian didn't do it on purpose, but it didn't make him any less angry, and the feelings of helplessness and loneliness continued to grow. Layla was already tired and just wanted to get rid of this unbearable pain that awaits her every day. Now she even feels awkward looking at him, but they will definitely meet at the festival. And Elliot will definitely be there. Even though she said that she had let go of her feelings for him, she was still not ready to meet him. The heroine would really like someone to give her advice. Suddenly she realized that she was more angry about the fact that her friend was taken away from her, and this made her even more angry. Anyway, she had a meeting with Julian tomorrow, and she needed to figure out what to do with the dress. He said to pick a red one, and since this is an annual tradition, there should be one left over from last year. Looking into the closet, unfortunately, there were only dresses in cool and pastel shades, not a single red one. This brought a question to Layla's mind. Did something happen that seemed very important to the lady, but not a word was said about it in the novel? In the morning, Julian, as promised, came to her house to accompany the lady. He was dressed in an expensive suit with red inserts, fully confirming his status as a marquis. Layla had hopes that he would forget about her, but this did not happen, and now she can only smile affably. Approaching the carriage, the girl immediately began a dialogue that she did not expect to see him. However, the man did not understand the subtext and seriously replied that he could not break his promise. In the novel, he ignored everything connected with Layla. Has his attitude towards the heroine changed, or is this another order from home? While she was lost in thought, the carriage pulled up to a shop selling festive clothing. Inside, as it turned out, not only the outfits were luxurious, but the entire building. A consultant immediately approached them, and the Marquis asked to bring all the dresses in red shades. Without waiting long, they brought her a robe and led her to a screen where she changed. It was bright red and very full with lace sleeves and hem. The next one turned out to be dark. A black bow wrapped around the entire dress and flowed down to the bottom. And the third one was decorated with white pearls, which definitely attracted attention. Julian looked at the image for a long time each time and assessed it, but remained silent. After yet another failed dress, he concluded that red didn't suit Layla at all, and the heroine agreed, but it was still unpleasant to hear. Suddenly he remembered that something similar had happened before in his childhood. When they were children, Layla once wore a red dress and asked him if it suited her. But that time the scoundrel ridiculed her taste and the girl herself, which really hurt the poor girl. His words offended the little girl and even brought her to tears. The mother then scolded the boy for his inappropriate behavior in front of his future daughter-in-law. This made him completely angry, and he already harbored a grudge. Now the heroine understood the reason for the absence of red things in her room and suddenly laughed. Julian found the lady's behavior strange, so she told him her guess about the color. The man didn't expect that his words in the past could hurt her so much. He was clearly embarrassed to admit his guilt, which is why he tried to somehow justify his little self. However, this did not change the fact that Layla had changed her preferences that day and adapted to him. Apparently this color is not for her, so she suggested trying on another one and pointed to a blue dress. She had a lot of dresses like that in her closet, but what could she do if red really didn't suit her? "Just not blue," Julian snapped, making it clear that he was against her choice. Naturally, this was irritating, but suddenly she was distracted by the now familiar sound of the bell. The girl got scared when she saw something or maybe someone. Ian appeared from the door and walked inside. He immediately noticed them, and Layla noted that they had been crossing paths for the second day in a row. The Duke seemed very confused by such a meeting, so the Marquis was the first to ask why he had come here. As it turned out, he just wanted to pick up the order, as he had recently been informed that it was ready. The heroine noticed that the man began to hold his gaze on her, as if trying to tell her or ask her something. This made her feel sick, and her worries came back in another new wave. She decided to run away, saying that she needed to continue trying on other dresses, and their color was no longer important. The girl quickly took the dress that the worker offered and ran behind the screen. The Duke did not expect the Marquis to go with Layla to the tailor and teased him about it, but he seriously stated that he was helping the bride choose an outfit. "Do you really care about her?" Ian asked Julian, suddenly determined. He replied that it was possible, trying to make his voice sound casual. But the Duke needed a sincere and precise answer, so he began to put pressure on the Marquise. However, Layla came out in a new red dress that faded into pink tones. Looking in the mirror, she realized that this was the most luxurious dress among all the others. Julian, on the contrary, thought it was very simple, but suitable for a girl. Therefore, I suggested adding some decorations to it to make it stand out from the rest. The heroine reminded the Marquis that she already had many different pieces of jewelry. But he was adamant and believed that the new dress needed new jewelry, and they should go to a jewelry store. Layla felt awkward arguing with Julian, so she agreed again and again. However, Ian, who was watching this scene, was against such an attitude towards the lady. The Marquis was proud of himself and his generosity. It all seemed wrong to the Duke. He felt a strange, familiar feeling. Julian took care of her, and Ian seemed to have nothing to complain about or worry about. This is how it should be, the Marquis with his legal bride, and their relationship is finally improving. But the Duke did not want her to wear this dress. He felt uneasy when he saw them together. The Duke made a displeased face. Apparently he had heard his words about the fabric after all. So Julian casually asked him again, already ready to start their war. The Duke didn't want to make himself look bad in front of the heroine, so he simply backed down. He picked up his order as originally planned and prepared to leave peacefully. Layla, looking at herself in the mirror again, sadly concluded that this color didn't suit her after all. Ian heard this and froze. He couldn't bear to hear her torturing herself any longer. The Duke turned around and saw a lovely, delicate flower. That's exactly how the girl looked in this robe. "No, it suits you very well. You are beautiful," said the Duke, smiling, approaching her. The girl was surprised, but thanked him. She was pleased with her friend's support. At that moment, time seemed to go back. Everything faded into the background. Only they remained. The Marquis seemed to be getting jealous. He was not happy that Layla was only smiling at Ian. It was already time for the Duke to leave, so he reluctantly left the store. The heroine really didn't want to part when they were finally able to have a normal conversation. She felt so awkward about yesterday, so she's glad we were able to talk. The Marquis saw the worry in her eyes but did not show it. He suggested going back to the jewelry and assured the lady not to worry about the price and to take whatever she liked. The girl woke up from her thoughts and followed him to the jewelry stands in the display case. Her gaze was drawn to the ruby rings, necklaces, and other items that matched the dress perfectly. Meanwhile, Ian had already gotten into the carriage and was heading home. This strange feeling tormented him, and he could do nothing about it now. He kept going over the situation with the dress, about his hypocritical words. The Duke did not understand why he said them and now regretted that he could not go back to the past and change everything. When he saw them together, for some reason he felt sick. Julian, for no apparent reason, began to treat Layla like his fiancée. It was strange that this irritated him. It seems that everything changed exactly when she, bravely saving Alicia, almost got hurt herself. Layla was ready to fall into the water just so that the same wouldn't happen to the main character. Just one wrong step and everything might not have ended so well. The man brushed off such gloomy thoughts. After this, he realized that his feelings for Alicia were insincere from the very beginning. Layla was so willing to help him, but he couldn't repay her in kind. He finally realized that he was irritated by his own cowardice. Ian thought that if Julian was protecting her, then everything was fine. But he didn't allow himself to continue this thought. The Duke doubted the sincerity and reliability of the Marquis because he had previously hated her. And now he liked the changes in her, but if she gets boring, then everything can go back to normal. And then Layla will cry again and feel pain from yet another lack of reciprocity. These thoughts made the man furious. He could not allow this to become reality. There is no point in seeking happiness in a marriage between aristocrats, and he knows it. Still, he didn't want her smile to fade. A breeze came into the carriage, as if trying to encourage Ian and help him come up with a plan. In his head, a course of action had indeed matured. The day had already turned into evening, and the sun set into night, and the estate was covered in the darkness of gloom. The heroine has just arrived home after a long shopping spree. A lot of boxes filled the sofa, and she thought she would get by with just one dress. What came over the unapproachable Julian? He never bought anything for Layla, much less gave her anything as a gift. He always condemned her when she spent a lot of money on trinkets. The girl began to suspect that he was up to something bad. But no matter how much she thought about it, she couldn't understand how buying the outfit and jewelry could harm her. But if that's the case, and she's missing out on something, it'll cost him twice as much, and he's not one to waste money. Surely his father gave him an order, and he simply had no other choice but to obey. It couldn't be any other way, but Layla no longer spoke these words with confidence. The eve of the autumn festival has arrived. There was unrest in the house from early morning. Everyone was preparing for a big event. Madame gathered the chief courtiers and instructed them to begin preparing her daughter for the celebration. The dressing table was filled with various cosmetics, from lipsticks to blush and perfumes. Any girl would envy such a set, and the heroine too, but the impression was ruined by getting up almost at dawn to get everything done. The lady doubted that this was really necessary, since she had not been pestered with such things during the spring holidays. Suddenly she heard quite familiar voices behind the door and listened to them. The parents discussed the festival, hoping that if everything went well, Julian would propose to her. Now the girl understood what all this excessive hassle was for. Her father and mother were worried because her fiancé suddenly began to show interest in her. The heroine did not take this story with the dress as they were told. She is sure that Julian did this only to amuse his own ego. In any case, their expectations were too much pressure on her, and she wants to be with someone who truly loves her. But all she can do is go with the flow. Ian would definitely be surprised if she told him her feelings. The servants began to assemble the image by carefully combing the unruly hair. And Layla continued to dream that maybe in the future she would find her love. But her search required so much effort. Although she told the Duke that she would find another, she no longer believed herself. Turning around, the lady saw her parents, who had come to watch the girl's transformation into their chance to enter the big world. It was incredibly infuriating. In this world, going against family is not so easy and can even cost you your life. Let's start with the fact that none of the relatives are interested in what the girl really felt. Only after getting married will she gain at least some value. The only one who pays attention to her is Ian. He helped the heroine find love, and I believed her crazy story about the affair. Why did he then propose to dissolve their alliance? And so suddenly, no matter how much she thought about it, she could not understand. The maid reported that the hairdo was ready, and now they began to hold hands. The heroine went to another table and placed her brushes on a special pillow for manicure. Layla hoped that she would be able to talk to the Duke at the festival today. Of course, it would be difficult to accomplish because of Julian, and she also wanted to apologize to Alicia. If events go as they did in the novel, the main character will be with Gilbert, and he will confess his feelings to her. Her alliance with Ian had broken up, so it would be a bit strange if she tried to stop the prince. What was best to do, all that was left was to guess. Finally, evening came. The autumn festival was about to begin, and Julian was already waiting for the lady at the gate of her house. The head and his wife greeted the Marquis warmly, one might even say sincerely. Julian bowed in response, greeting his wife's parents just as politely. They called their daughter, who still managed to be late, although she had been getting ready since early morning. When the girl came into the light, it seemed that Julian's jaw dropped. She always acted as if there was no one more beautiful than her, and this constantly drove him crazy. But now she really was more beautiful than ever, so much so that you couldn't take your eyes off her. The red dress hugged her, showing off her slim figure, and the ruby earrings and necklace complemented her pink skin. Beautiful involuntarily escaped the lips of the Marquis, who had already managed to blush at the sight of his wife. He was shocked by the realization of what he had just said out loud, and tried to close his mouth. But the heroine had already heard this and, embarrassed, thanked him. She was very worried that the outfit didn't suit her after all. Now, seeing how the man can't stop looking at her, she is convinced of the opposite. By calling him again, Layla was able to bring the Marquis out of his trance, and he awkwardly regained his position. Holding back his emotions with all his might, he nevertheless extended his hand to her, inviting her into the carriage. The scene genuinely amused Layla, but if she continued, Julian seemed likely to run away in embarrassment. Therefore, the heroine calmly accepted the gesture of the man, who continued to look at her. Deep down, the Marquise was even irritated that Layla could be so bewitching. When they arrived at the palace, the long-awaited festive night had arrived. Once inside, many people noticed them. The heroine knew that there would be a lot of people, but this time there were more of them than usual. Julian explained this by the fact that not only aristocrats had gathered here, but also simply influential people. The girl had the feeling that everyone was looking at them, but the Marquise waved it off, saying that it was just her imagination. Rumors began to spread around the room that the House of Holloway had officially accepted her as their bride. Layla understood their surprise, since it was rare to see the Marquis accompany her anywhere. The attention was making her feel awkward, but then someone caught the lady's attention. Having looked at the images more closely, Layla realized who she had met. The hall was filled with a noisy hubbub. Everyone also noticed the approaching couple. The prince appeared with his companion, Alicia. The main character finally put on the green dress that Gilbert sent her, and together they were united like true lovers. The whole room was looking only at them. Alicia must be experiencing indescribable emotions right now. While the heroine was looking at her arriving friends, she noticed another one behind them. It was Ian in his blue suit, but today he had also styled his hair, which gave him more importance. The heroine called him, but he was at the other end of the large hall and did not hear. But Julian heard that he did not like the prospect at all that the Duke could now take his bride. So he, taking Layla with him, hurried to get away from that place, away from Ian. It happened so suddenly for the lady, so the Marquis made an excuse that the dancing would soon begin and they needed to go to the ballroom. The girl didn't even have time to answer whether she agreed at all, but who would listen to her? Only the Duke heard her call, but he could not understand where it came from, and only when they were already moving away did he see Layla. He was about to follow them into another room, but Gilbert called out to him. How inopportune it was, but there was no other way out. I had to greet the prince and calm down. But it wasn't easy to fool his friend. He immediately noticed the absence of his companion. Ian hadn't had time to come up with an excuse in advance, so he had to improvise on the spot. But it turned out pretty badly. Alicia also decided to join the conversation and asked if he was lonely. Just a couple of months ago, he wanted to see her as his companion. He kept thinking about how best to start a conversation and how to invite her so that it would look natural. All his thoughts were occupied with this, but now it no longer mattered. He was pulled out of his thoughts by the prince's question, which hit the nail on the head and caught Ian off guard. He asked if the companion he wanted to invite was busy, but the Duke waved him off and insisted that he simply wanted to come alone this time. In his heart, the man was sure that Layla would come alone and they would spend the day together, but unfortunately, something went wrong. There was also a buffet in the ballroom, and lively music was playing in full swing. While they were standing at the tables, Julian invited the ladies to dance when the next composition began. As if on cue, the music changed and the Marquis extended his hand, inviting her. Before the heroine could touch him, he grabbed her and pulled her into the crowd of dancers. The man squeezed the lady's wrist so hard that it even caused a slight pain. The heroine felt uncomfortable. It's not that she couldn't dance, on the contrary. In her past life, the heroine even went to a dance club. But now she could barely keep up with Julian's pace. That's where he was in such a hurry. The Marquis noticed the girl's mistakes and commented on it with sarcasm, because Layla once called herself the ideal bride. Of course, she apologized, but she wrote a whole article to herself about how this rooster was not a pro at all either. The heroine didn't understand why a lady would say such a thing, but the man wanted to continue his speech. But the music stopped, ending the sequence of the dance, and everyone had to curtsy to each other as a sign of respect. And yet, even if you can't dance, the voice that called Julian did not let him finish. Apparently, some acquaintance of the Marquis approached them and invited him to join their company. The man agreed, since they really hadn't seen each other for a long time, and went after him. And Layla was left alone. She realized that he was most likely going to be here for a long time, so she decided to drink something to entertain herself. But suddenly someone grabbed her hand. Turning around, the girl saw Ian in front of her, who continued to hold the lady tenderly. The heroine was surprised, but at the same time incredibly happy about his appearance. It turned out that the man wanted to talk to her a little and not dance, as she initially thought, which touched her even more. But suddenly the next melody started playing. It was time for her to dance with Julian, but the Duke did not want to let the girl go. Ian decided to invite the heroine to a waltz himself and took her with him to the dance floor. Before it was too late, Layla admitted that she was not a very good dancer for a lady and would only get in the way. "Everything is fine," the Duke assured her, and she believed him. It seemed that his smile made all her worries go away. And they, albeit awkwardly, began to move. The heroine felt that the sensations were completely different compared to the first dance. Could it be that it's all because Ian is with her? Her heart was pounding like crazy, but Layla finally felt calm for the first time since their fight. Their couple circled in the center of the hall, and everyone paid attention, but they themselves thought only about each other. But among them all was Julian, who watched in irritation as his bride was snatched away from under his nose. As soon as he stepped away for a moment, she, his bride, was already dancing with another man. The Marquis heard the rest of the aristocrats discussing his Layla behind his back. Everyone didn't notice her beauty until this moment, and now they're spreading rumors about her infidelity. But at the same time, they noted that Ian looked much better with her than with the son of the Holloway house. Everyone was talking about Julian, not embarrassed by his presence, and this only infuriated the Marquis even more. And the dancing couple didn't even notice that they were being discussed or criticized by those present. They didn't care about the others. They continued to talk about insignificant trifles. For example, about the lady's lie that she dances poorly, because from the beginning of the dance there was not a single hesitation. Although the heroine knew perfectly well that all this time it was the Duke who was adjusting to her pace, he denied it. Every time a man hugged a girl so lightly, her heart pounded with embarrassment. It had been so long since she had felt this. But the composition stopped and the miracle disappeared. Everything will soon become difficult again. But for now, I don't want to think about it. Layla, Ian said seriously to her, it seems like the problems are going to start right now. And indeed, he had an important conversation with the heroine, which he was afraid to start. He asked to have a minute after the festival, but it's unlikely that we'll be able to talk here. Understanding this, the lady suggested talking at her home without unnecessary witnesses. The Duke agreed and promised to definitely visit her soon. An important conversation. Most likely, it will be about an alliance. The heroine also wanted to discuss this. But suddenly someone's hand painfully grabbed her shoulder and sharply turned her towards the man. "Follow me!" Julian was furious. The heroine was so afraid she couldn't even utter a word. He dragged Layla somewhere by force, who was stumbling on her heels, which were not designed for running. He led her out of the building and headed to a familiar gazebo, hidden from prying eyes. Only after entering there did the Marquis finally release his grip, but this did not make him feel any calmer. Unable to control his thoughts, he began to take out his anger on the girl, saying that it was the first time he had experienced such humiliation because of her. The heroine was scared. She was afraid to say anything, because it could only provoke the man even more. But the silence didn't make things any better. Julian questioned her about why she danced with Ian, since she had come here with the Marquis, but had left him and gone to dance with another. Realizing that silence was not the answer, the lady began to justify herself. Because she had her first dance with him, that was the main thing. It is not etiquette to dance with someone other than your partner, unless it is your first dance. These words led the Marquis into a dead end, but he was not going to back down. Are you saying that you are not interested in Ian at all? Layla didn't understand where this conclusion came from. But it still made me think, this is impossible. She and the Duke are just allies who help each other find love. Until recently she liked Elliot. She couldn't say if it was true love. And even after that, Ian's words about dissolution were like a bolt from the blue, and she couldn't think about anything else. The heroine again asked herself the annoying question of whether she really liked the Duke. She herself did not know the answer to Julian's question. The Marquis saw Layla's confusion and seemed to lose his temper. He grabbed her by the shoulders and, without controlling his strength, squeezed them, continuing to scream at her in despair. "You must love me." Selfish words burst out of him, but there was also great sadness in them. Julian completely stopped understanding the girl's actions, because before she kept repeating how much she loved him. The past, Layla became jealous when she saw him with other women. And then she humiliated them and cruelly abused them in various ways, from moral to physical. The original Layla dreamed of marrying the Marquis, but that could only remain a dream. The current lady was afraid of such an outcome. She tried not to show affection for him, but it only made Julian more attracted to her. "Please listen to me." The heroine tried to stop him and clarify the situation, but he interrupted her, because he had just decided everything clearly. They would get married, and then she would definitely be his. The Marquis leaned towards her. Taking her by the chin, he directed her for a kiss. This is not how Layla imagined her first kiss. In a panic, the heroine pushed the man away, not allowing his plan to come true. The girl miscalculated her strength and almost fell, but was able to regain her balance on her own. No more romantic scenes with him. Julian stared at her in surprise and asked her in confusion why she had pulled away, because didn't she love him? The heroine was completely lost in her thoughts, so in order not to make a decision, she simply ran away. The place no longer mattered, somewhere but far away from him. While leaving in a hurry, the lady dropped a ruby earring, which apparently opened in the ballroom. The abandoned marquis looked after Layla for a long time, but did not dare to move from his place. Suddenly, something on the path sparkled in the light of the lanterns. Picking up the jewelry, he realized that it was the very earring of his runaway bride. During this tense time, the aristocrats relaxing in the hall continued to have fun. The welcoming part was almost over, and Ian was already looking forward to the continuation. Suddenly someone called him again, and he decided to turn around at the call. Alicia. Today she was more beautiful than ever. Green suited her better. The Duke was surprised by Gilbert's absence, although he had seen how recently they had been together. As it turned out, the king had called him and he should have returned already, but the prince never came. Ian glanced around the room, searching for his friend. And indeed, he was standing next to his father and greeting some honored guests. It was an awkward situation, because Gilbert literally abandoned his companion. Of course, Alicia understood her unworthy position in society, but she was still very offended, and there was nothing she could do about it. The Duke understood that it was urgent to somehow correct the oppressive atmosphere. He remembered seeing her dance with the prince and decided to remind her of Gilbert's true feelings. His joke was successful. The girl immediately became embarrassed and began to justify her mistakes in her movements. To prevent her from becoming a tomato, the man said that everyone was looking only at the prince, so no one saw her stumble. For this, Alicia called him a rude person, but then, unable to restrain herself, she laughed. The next melody started playing, and she suggested showing how much better she had become at dancing. Ian accepted her revenge. He was not going to give in, and decided that he would be her harshest critic. Of course, he understood that it was all their joke, but when he took the girl by the hand, the atmosphere changed. Meanwhile, Layla was running down the corridor away from her own fiancé. She still didn't understand what had gotten into Julian that he had changed his attitude towards her so dramatically. The heroine remembered how he pulled her towards a kiss, how he himself took the initiative. Still, it's good that she was able to push him away in time. But that uncomprehending and lost look of the man was imprinted in the lady's memory. If her parents find out that she rejected Julian, they will be furious. And what to do now? Maybe if she blames it on embarrassment, the punishment won't be too harsh. Why is this even happening? She had no desire to kiss the Marquise. At that moment, the girl realized that she was not thinking about the groom she had been forced to marry, but about another man. The only thing in my head was Ian's face. It seemed that she really liked this man, she convinced herself again, but for the first time she did not allow herself to stop. Why did she only notice this now, and how could she look him in the eye now? Ian, Julian, no matter how much you think about it, it's all useless. Making any decision seems impossible. We need to go back to the hall. It would be too awkward if the girl met the Marquise again. Finally, hastily entering inside, such a picture unfolded before her. The Duke and Alicia were dancing in the center of the hall, just as they once did. Layla admitted how mesmerizingly they danced, that it was impossible to take your eyes off them. But suddenly she began to hear others talking about how the prince was dancing with the simpleton for fun. Perhaps these two were connected by childhood and were brought together by fate itself. The heroine stood alone in the middle of the dancing couples. These conversations of others were driving her crazy. House Ainsworth has always been concerned about the fate of the child of House Henderson's mistress. She had only just accepted her love, but reality had already made it clear that there was no place for her among them. Layla realized that even though their alliance was no more, Ian still liked Alicia. She had better get home before her heart completely breaks, which it will if she stays here for another minute. And so the girl runs away from people again, although not on purpose, and Julian only managed to find her, but she was already leaving and didn't even look back. The earring continued to bother the man because it needed to be given to its owner. Apparently, now was not the best moment, however. Julian was worried about the girl. Looking again at what he had lost, he firmly decided to visit his bride and make sure of her condition, otherwise anxiety would drive him crazy. It was not yet past midnight, and the heroine had already returned to her native estate. She was very worried about the consequences of her early arrival, and even more so that she did not live up to her parents' expectations. Layla, stern voices greeted the girl, not foreshadowing anything good. So the main thing is not to show that everything is very, very bad, so she greeted me kindly. The parents immediately pounced on the heroine with complaints because she had slipped away from the ball. The heroine naturally began to deny her guilt, but would she be able to reach the adults? It seems not, as they suspected that something was wrong between her and Julian again. Suddenly, the father began to approach Layla, and his hand rose higher and higher. Nothing happened. Loud words stopped the head and forced him to retreat. What is the Marquis doing here? She made it clear then that she didn't want to see him. Does he really want to tell about what happened in the gazebo? That's all that was missing. If the parents find out about this, one slap in the face won't be enough. That's how far Layla's father can go. The man said that he had a couple of things to do, so he stayed late and asked her to return home first. He protected her. The parents' expressions immediately changed. They put on their signature smile, and anyone who didn't know the truth would definitely fall for it. As it turned out, Julian wanted to give back the little thing that the girl had lost through carelessness. He carefully took out the fragile decoration. Somehow he treated the ordinary decoration too carefully. The lady nevertheless accepted the earring, although she was still embarrassed by the meeting with the Marquis. Looking up, she noticed the man's sad gaze directed at her. It was already time for Julian to go back, but you could tell from him that he wanted to stay at least for another hour. Well, she was exaggerating. Surprisingly, the heroine didn't want to leave either. The head of the house was looking at her back. He decided that since the groom was going to return what she had lost, the festival would be a great success. The parents could now go and inspect the territory with peace of mind, and Layla would be able to take care of herself. From the living room window, she watched them leave. Despite the fact that it was deep night, the parents called for a personal carriage and got ready to set off. Thank God everything ended well for everyone, but why did the Marquis decide to protect her? He's been acting strange lately, first the dress, then the attempt to kiss. No matter how much I racked my brains, his actions remained a mystery. After such a hard day, only a hot bubble bath could save him. A lot of important things happened today when she danced with Julian and Ian. But the second one evoked mixed emotions. The newly acquired comfort was replaced by burning pain. The heroine wanted to be happy for the Duke, that he was still able to win over the main character. But no matter how unpleasant it was, it's better not to remember. Suddenly it dawned on her that the girl had jumped up in the bathroom, causing splashes. While she was thinking about their dance, she completely forgot something very important. The Duke would be arriving soon, and she needed to hurry to their scheduled meeting. Finally, they will be able to calmly have a heart-to-heart talk without hiding anything from each other. But the palace was still not going to calm down. The festive night for everyone was just beginning. Ian, looking at the time, realized that it was time to go to Layla. But his plans were again interrupted by Gilbert's voice calling out to him. He asked his friend to stay for another minute and discuss something important to him. They went out onto the balcony away from everyone, apparently. The conversation would be really difficult. The prince leaned on the railing, preparing to talk. Gathering his strength, he said that his parents were categorically against Alicia. This means that on that occasion, when he was away with the king, he was introduced not just to important aristocrats, but to possible future wives. How unpleasant and uncomfortable the prince felt in those moments. Everything will be fine. I'm sure you'll be able to convince His Majesty. Ian tried to support his friend as best he could. But these words did not console Gilbert. He continued to plunge into his thoughts. The prince complained that his parents were not as kind as everyone else's, which makes sense since they were the rulers of this country. Perhaps Alicia would be better off with you, his friend suddenly said in despair, but with surprising persistence, which shocked the Duke. He had long noticed how lovingly he looked at her all the time. There was only one conclusion to be drawn: Ian liked the main character. Gilbert's father was rude to Alicia, and he couldn't even go after her and calm her down. So the prince begged, to visit Alicia instead of him. The man was shocked by such a request, but even more so by the sad state of his friend. The next day came, and Layla sleepily looked out the window as if looking for someone. After yesterday's stress, the girl couldn't fall asleep for a long time, so she woke up sluggish and sleep-deprived. Just as she was about to fall asleep again, someone turned to her and stopped her from falling into the world of dreams. It was the maid who reported that breakfast was ready, which the lady had asked to be prepared early. The heroine waited for Ian all night, but he never came. Maybe something happened. Since it was still early autumn, the weather was warm, so the lady had breakfast in the garden near the house. How the heroine wanted to sleep, But what would her parents say if she went to bed instead of doing something useful? Maybe a cup of coffee would perk her up. Suddenly there was a noise on the road, but it definitely couldn't be her parents. However, the carriage stopped at the gates of the estate and was about to enter the courtyard. Could it be that the Duke finally decided to visit her? It was necessary to check, so Layla rushed to the approaching transport. To be honest, she continued to hope that her friend had not abandoned her and would come out to meet her. But Julian appeared from the crew. It wasn't what his heroine wanted to see. Disappointment flashed fleetingly across her face. Looking at the marquee, memories of the kiss she had interrupted flashed through her mind again. After yesterday, she feels awkward even looking into the eyes she involuntarily has to look away. The heroine noticed that he arrived early today. Maybe something happened. "We need to talk." Julian looked seriously at the lady, crossing his arms. But now there were servants walking around here, each doing their own thing, but this did not exclude the possibility that they could overhear their conversation. Therefore, Layla suggested going deeper into the garden where no one would hear. The man thought this would be appropriate and agreed. Having walked far enough, Julian stopped and began to apologize for his actions yesterday. At first, the girl didn't even understand what he was talking about. She so didn't expect to see the Marquis admit his guilt. And then he asked if her parents had done anything to her. The heroine remembered the lost thing adults really could have reacted badly to such carelessness. Layla replied that everything was fine, but the Marquis saw doubts in her emotions apparently. She thought that he would tell everything to the adults. "And so every time, you could have been scolded because of me." He looked at her with concern, making it clear that he was really worried about the lady. But the heroine only became more worried because it means that Julian knows about these insults. He knows that for his parents, their own daughter means little and has almost no value. The girl still assured that there was no need to worry about yesterday's incident. But, as it turned out, that was not all he wanted to talk about. Their last meetings made him change his mind. Did he really want to break off the engagement? "Layla, marry me," Julian said, striking the appropriate pose. These were the very words the heroine feared, and so she froze in place from the sting. Fortunately, the Marquis didn't ask her to give an answer right now. He hadn't discussed it with his parents yet, but he would soon make an official proposal. He was about to get into the carriage, but suddenly something stopped him. Another carriage drove into the yard. Judging by its appearance, it was definitely that of some honorary aristocrat. And indeed, Ian came out from there, who was no less surprised to meet the Marquis. Of course, Julian was not happy to see his intrusive friend here in his bride's house. That's why he immediately pounced on him with claims. The Duke also really didn't want to see him anytime soon and argue. "Stop it already." Julian, however, seems ready to defend his position at all times. He had closed his eyes before because he considered them friends, but meeting someone else's fiancée so often was already too much. Ian couldn't find an answer. He was too immersed in thoughts about other things. Finally, he gave them a friendly advice never to approach them again. The Duke remained in place, shocked he had not been in a good mood before, and after this his mood completely disappeared. What can be done to relieve this pain? As he sat back in the carriage, he suddenly realized that Julian was serious, which meant he really liked Layla. If he had been able to come last night, would he have been able to change anything? A few hours earlier, Ian was driving to Alicia's house to fulfill the request of Guybert, who had almost begged him to do it. He had never seen his friend in such a desperate state. Even in front of his friends, he tried to contain his emotions, as befits a prince. But still, the Duke thought for a long time about making a decision. What a terrible friend he was. Having stopped oppressing himself, the man hoped to have time to first visit Alicia, and then straight to Layla. Arriving at the place, he was met at the entrance by courtiers. Ian noted that they looked somehow exhausted. He wanted to ask where he could find the main character. But suddenly, before I even had time to finish the question, I heard a girl's squeal from the house. Pushing the servant aside from the passage, the Duke burst into the estate. Running towards the screams, he entered a room and saw Alicia's father holding her by the hair and scolding her. A disgusting sight. "What are you doing?" Ian yelled indignantly so as to draw attention to himself. Alicia looked at the man with horror and panic in her eyes, most likely because she didn't want him to see her in such a position. But the Baron had no intention of letting the girl go, but only clung to her tighter. He smelled foul, apparently. The Baron had gotten drunk again and didn't understand what he was doing. But, meeting the Duke's angry gaze, he chickened out and ran away, but not before saying that his daughter was a disgrace to the family. Ian approached the crying protagonist and tried to help her stand up while asking about her condition. Alicia said that her father saw her dancing with His Majesty the Prince at the festival. The man could not even imagine how cruelly the girl was treated in her own home. That's why he suggested, even insisted, that she live in his house for a while. His parents were just complaining that they hadn't seen Alicia for a long time, and she happily agreed. The Duke immediately got ready and took the girl to a safe place, and she thanked him all the while. Ian decided it was necessary to tell her that Gilbert was the one who was most worried about her. But for some reason, this only upset Alicia. She remembered that she and the prince were literally from different worlds. But she had only just begun to believe that love had come to her. It was no wonder that her father called her an ignoramus who didn't know her place. The Duke understood that this was not true, but seeing the girl's tears, he was afraid to say something wrong. "I wonder if I loved you, it wouldn't hurt so much," she asked herself. This question caught the man off guard. He couldn't answer it. It seemed that Alicia did not want to say it out loud, but the Duke had already heard. Apparently, such thoughts often visited her. Deep down, he knew that the main character was partly right. Having collected his thoughts, the Duke nevertheless answered with a smile that Alicia would hardly ever love him. Now it was the girl's turn to be surprised. Ian explained that they were like brother and sister to each other, and she didn't see him as a man. These words touched Alicia, and she sadly lowered her eyes. Was she really being rejected again? "You are in so much pain because you really love Gilbert," the Duke continued. The main character realized that her friend simply wanted her to cherish this feeling and thanked him. Layla was probably already asleep, so the man decided that he would go to her tomorrow morning. While Ian turned away to the window, Alicia stopped smiling and also stared out her window. Present time. The Duke arrived at the heroine's house. He had come so far, if he left now, he would break the promise he had given to her. Clenching his fists and casting aside his cowardice, the man walked into the garden to meet Layla. She was still waiting for him at the table, but with each passing minute, her hope was leaving her. But thoughts about Julian's marriage proposal kept coming back to her, wondering if he was even serious. Soon a servant came and announced that the Duke of Ainsworth's son had arrived. The heroine was very happy with this news and asked him to bring him to her in the gazebo. Ian appeared from the gate and Layla ran up to him. She had been waiting for their meeting. He apologized for not coming yesterday because an urgent matter suddenly came up. But this didn't matter to the girl anymore because the man had come after all, and that was the main thing. "Layla," began the Duke, who had been tormented by one persistent question ever since their separation. He asked what she and Julian had talked about a lot depended on her answer. The heroine remained silent. The question was too unexpected, but she also felt that it was very important for him. After stalling for a little longer, she decided to tell the truth about the proposal made to the Marquises. She also added that she herself was sure that he was not serious. This was not in Julian's spirit, but the Duke only shook his head in protest. He believed that, on the contrary, the Marquis was completely serious and did not make an offer without thinking everything over. The lady did not understand why he was trying so hard to take the blonde's side and began to persuade him. But the man did not let her finish, interrupting her. He only began to congratulate her on her upcoming wedding. Ian was the last person Layla wanted to hear congratulations from because she loved him. The Duke reminded that Julian would be more needed and useful because he had an excellent pedigree. He would be a good husband and partner for her in the future, and his friend was able to admit it. The heroine didn't even want to hear this, especially from the person standing in front of her now. "And you don't want to know what I think about Julian." The heroine could no longer tolerate this mockery. This change in emotions made the man pause and finally look at her face, which he had been trying to avoid all this time. Yes, his friend still had a lot to learn, but he cared about Layla. At least he had recently started to. But the girl herself did not take it seriously and only became angrier. The Duke wanted to take her hand to encourage her, but the heroine pulled her shoulder away and did not allow him to do so. The lady did not want to listen to him any longer, and, having said at last that he should not decide what was best for her, she left. Of course, Ian could have rushed after her, but guilt prevented him from chasing. After what he said, it would have been selfish. Layla returned to the house so angry that her fists clenched involuntarily. Angry, the girl walked down the hallway to her room and sat down on the beautiful bed. Ian started talking about Julian so quickly she didn't even have time to confess her feelings to him. And in the end, she just took out all the anger that had built up since yesterday on him. The heroine didn't even notice how she fell asleep on a soft bed, and when she woke up, it was already evening. She thought again that she had never had the courage to change anything. All she could do was sit and cry, and that's why Layla hated herself. The girl understood that she would not be able to meet and talk with the Duke anytime soon. Looking sadly at the window, she suddenly noticed something moving in the yard. It was a carriage. The carriage was not red, so it was not the Marquis or the Duke. Or perhaps they had changed the carriage. The heroine became interested and decided to check, so she went down to the hall. Layla's parents appeared from the door, but they weren't expected to return anytime soon. The father noticed his daughter and, delighted, asked her to come to them. Such a wide smile only embarrassed the lady. "Layla, you did it." The father hugged the girl. The head seemed to have gone mad. She had never seen him so happy. He said he and his wife had received a formal marriage proposal from the Holloway house. Now the adults could breathe a sigh of relief, but Layla was horrified by this news. Julian promised to give her time to think about her answer. Had he really already told her everything? Meanwhile, Ian had already returned to the estate and was sitting in his office. He remembered how he upset Layla, for which she yelled at him, and he fully deserved it. How he hurt again the one he loved and adored, the one he promised to protect. Made the girl cry when the esteemed Duke managed to become such an idiot. He wondered at what point everything had gone wrong. Perhaps it all started with his failure to express his feelings to Alicia. Then he met Layla, who turned out to be completely different from how people described her. And then Ian dragged the lady into this love affair and thereby put her in great danger. And only after all this was he finally able to confess his feelings to the main character. Part of him was, surprisingly, glad that the feelings between them were not reciprocated. His feelings turned out to be too complex to understand. Even he himself was already confused. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door of his room, and the Duke let the guest in. Alicia still managed to find new dresses in the house and has already managed to dress up. At some point, the Duke forgot about the girl he had recently saved. Alone, the main character had unnecessary thoughts in her head, so she asked to stay with him. Ian apologized for such a blunder because he was now responsible for it, and he himself was constantly thinking about something. But Alicia was only amused that they had a similar condition. What a coincidence. "At such moments you can't be alone if you want. I can listen to you," the girl said tenderly. The Duke was rarely bothered by anything, and this must have been excruciating, but he agreed to share it with her. They decided to discuss all pressing issues over a cup of black tea. They say it helps to calm down. To begin with, the man decided to ask the main character how her parents reacted to the sudden move, to which Alicia only smiled as a sign that everything was fine and she was glad for the change of scenery. While the tea was cooling, the Duke thought about how best to present the girl with information about Layla. He was interested in what she was doing now, whether she had breakfast, how she felt. In that situation a few hours ago, he could only congratulate her on such an important event. Julian himself chose and then presented the lady with a dress and accompanied her to the festival. Ian admitted that he was doing a great job as her fiancé. If he truly values her, then Layla's feelings may change over time. A picture suddenly appeared before his eyes in which his friend and she were laughing. They got married and were now having fun. For some reason, the Duke's heart sank. Unbearable pain gripped him, apparently from the loss of a dear person. Alicia noticed a change in Ian's face, a bad change, and asked if he was okay. But the man just waved it off and insisted that everything was fine with him and that there was no need to pay attention. And the day was drawing to an end, and in Layla's house everyone had already learned of the happy news. The heroine's day had not gone well since the morning, and now an official engagement proposal has arrived. The girl recalled her conversation with Ian and how angry she was at his lack of seriousness. But no matter what the Duke said, she simply could not imagine life next to the Marquis. Lately, he has been really kind to her, even accompanying her to the ball of his own free will. Maybe Julian really is trying to change. The heroine rejected such thoughts again. She didn't want to let herself be deceived, because this was just another of the Marquis's whims. He could go back to his old self at any moment, and under such circumstances, Layla simply cannot marry him. Besides, she loves another, but the Duke doesn't even know her true thoughts. The girl again remembered the most precious moments with him, how they danced at the ball and were there only the two of them. The heroine suddenly realized that she had to tell Ian about her feelings. Maybe then she would feel better. She didn't know what would happen after the confession, but she couldn't miss this chance now. Otherwise, she will marry Julian without ever talking to the Duke, and this will torment her. Therefore, we must hurry to visit him. The courtiers eventually turned their attention to the lady, who was hurrying somewhere, and asked if she needed their help. She said that she would be away for a short time, and if her parents found out, it would only add to her problems. It was necessary to act quickly, so the heroine immediately ordered the carriage to be prepared for departure. But it still took quite a while, and without hiding her tension, she hurried the servants. Of course, she was a little ashamed of her behavior, but the heroine was now their mistress. Moreover, all her thoughts were occupied by one person, whom she could not refuse. As much as she wanted to quickly implement her plan while the adrenaline was running high, she arrived at the estate only a couple of hours later. Layla quickly got out of her carriage and headed towards the man's house. At this time, he usually drinks tea with Gilbert, who often visits his friend. They must be somewhere nearby. All that was left was to find them, but suddenly a familiar voice addressed her. Turning around, the girl expected to meet Ian, but saw a smartly dressed Julian. Naturally, she was disappointed, but she hid it as best she could while greeting him. He asked why Layla had come here so late without telling anyone. The heroine hesitated. She completely forgot that Julian could be here too because he was also Ian's friend. Sorry, the Marquis suddenly apologized for something while lowering his eyes with regret. The girl looked at him in amazement because he again said things that were completely out of character for him. The man explained that he really had no intention of rushing her, but when her parents found out he had proposed, they told them to hurry. Layla reminded herself again that she loved the Duke and felt nothing of the sort for Julian. So maybe now is the time to tell the Marquis something before it's too late. The man was ready to listen to her, in principle, to do anything, just so that she would not get angry. At the festival, you were right, the heroine, wanted to confess her true feelings. But she was interrupted by a girlish squeal, which expressed not fear, but rather joy and happiness. A carriage appeared in the distance, from which Ian and Alicia emerged, who stumbled on the threshold, and this amused her. The Duke was still worried about the girl, but after making sure that she was okay, he also laughed. Seeing the happy couple, the heroine involuntarily became upset, and tears began to well up. Alicia thanked the man for his concern and asked him to continue to accompany her. Ian insisted that the main character was exaggerating, but he himself promised to constantly keep an eye on her. Apparently, they were very comfortable and had fun together. As happy as they were, Layla felt emptiness and jealousy, a painful feeling. But the Duke danced with Alicia at the festival, and since she refused him, something has changed in them. The main character no longer looked so sad and depressed. Still, the heroine didn't have a chance. Julian also noticed the change and that Alicia was not getting along with Gilbert. The Marquis confirmed that because of the environment against their union, the girl got together with Ian. Layla didn't want to admit that they looked good together. It's clear. That's all she could squeeze out of herself. The pain didn't allow her to be happy for her friends. Unrequited love. If she confesses, she will definitely be rejected, and her confession will probably only cause problems for Ian. This means that fate does not allow her any other choice but to marry the Marquis. Julian, I will marry you. From this moment, everything will change. We must leave the past. The next day, everyone already knew about her consent to the man's proposal. The servants dressed Layla up before meeting her groom, but this only depressed the girl. There was an important conversation to take place today, and she couldn't disappoint her parents. My father would probably advise me to choose something bright and eye-catching, but for the heroine, all the dresses she had looked absolutely the same. The servants offered her various options, but she could not choose, so she asked her to go to her father and ask his advice. The courtiers appreciated this approach, because this way they would definitely satisfy the head's request. Left alone in the room, the heroine went to the window, or rather to the fresh air, to calm down. Meanwhile, Alicia was walking around her childhood friend's vast estate. Happy that the dark streak in her life seemed to be ending, she decided to visit Ian. The servants in the house were actively discussing something all this time, and didn't even try to lower their voices. That's why the main character, a gossip lover, became interested in their conversation. They finally decided to get married. The servants' conversation echoed off the walls. The girl, hiding behind the wall, decided to eavesdrop and heard them discussing the daughter of the Bartwhistle house and her obsession with the son of Dame Holloway. But she also learned the most important thing, that her friend and Julian would soon be getting married. Shocked by this turn of events, Alicia decided to quickly get away from the crime scene. The main character headed towards the Duke and, fortunately, ran into him in the corridor. Ian was surprised by the girl's haste and worriedly asked what happened. It seemed like she was about to explode from an overabundance of emotions and information. Layla and Julian are getting married. Her words hung in the air like a heavy weight. The Duke froze at these words. He lost the power of speech and did not know how to react to this. And the main character was only happy and excited that her friend was getting married. This was the first time this had happened to her. She asked the man what to give in such cases, not paying attention to Ian's condition. Alicia even complained that Layla didn't tell her everything at once, then she would have had more time to choose a gift. The girl continued to pester the Duke with her questions about the wedding gift. At some point, the man couldn't take it anymore and started shouting at the main character. Of course, she was shocked by her friend's behavior and did not understand where she had gone wrong. Ian realized too late what he had done. He had unfairly yelled at Alicia for no reason. "Sorry, I've been very busy lately and I'm all worked up," the Duke tried to justify himself. In order not to cause even more trouble, he decided to leave the girl as the best. Alicia had no idea why her friend reacted so sharply to such a seemingly joyful event. He decided to retire and distance himself from reality in his office, where he would not be disturbed. The Duke's strength left him, so he fell as soon as he entered the room and leaned against the door. His head was a complete mess. He himself told Layla back then in the gazebo that this damn marriage was a good idea. But as soon as he imagined her in a wedding dress and without it, sadness overcame him. Now reality hit him hard. If only he could express his feelings immediately, then his dream girl could be with him. But why suffer and think now when you can't turn back time and fix everything? She is already engaged to Julian anyway, and he is powerless against her decision. It was too late for them from the start, and their romance was destined to have a bad ending. A few days later at the Bartwhistle house, the head of the estate joyfully welcomed his daughter's fiancé, who began to visit them quite often. The heroine, on her father's orders, dressed up every day to greet the Marquis. Now that the two families had finally met, the head planned to talk about the wedding date. Layla from the novel would definitely be surprised by such a smooth development of events. Yes, that's how it should have happened. Now she's where she should be. Everything is fine. Julian interrupted the lady's father's speech and wanted to tell her some amazing news. It may be amazing, but it's definitely not for the heroine. She's just coming to terms with her position as a bride. "Before the wedding itself, I would like to hold a reception," the Marquis said, which meant that fate wanted to torment her even more, because if Ian was there, would she be able to talk to him normally without grief?